Hey guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I'm thrilled to have Mike Israetel back on the podcast, and we have a massive 2-hour catch-up for you guys to enjoy. We discuss the challenges of body and muscle dysmorphia, how to identify it and work through it. Mike also opens up about his personal journey, including shifting away from hardcore bodybuilding, reducing supplement use, and changing his approach to his leg training. We also chat about some of his experiences going on huge platforms such as the Diary of a CEO and his plan as RP continues to grow. Guys, if you enjoyed this, be sure to share over on Instagram, take a photo, tag me and Mike. Highly appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future episodes, and share it with anyone else you think might enjoy it. Leave us a review, a comment. It's all appreciated. Please just take a moment to do it. Otherwise, guys, there's so much that goes into this episode. I know you're going to enjoy it. Let's dive straight in. Mike, it's fantastic to have you back on the show. In fact, I didn't realize you would be able to come on so soon, which was a really nice thing, because I was like, hey, Mike's a very busy man. Will I be able to get him back on the show this year? And it's happened, so I'm really pleased. And that's something I wanted to talk about, is how busy you've been. Obviously on some huge podcasts, most recently my nemesis, Stephen, the Diary of a CEO. I don't know why he's my nemesis, because we share the same name.
Yes, and you're from the same locale, so it's already kind of up. Did you know that Chris Williamson and Mike Thurston, who look almost identical, are from the same, like they went to uni together, bro. They knew each other in uni. It must be crazy to like show someone a picture of like a guy you're dating, and she's like, oh my God, my friend dated that guy's name's Chris, right? You're like, no, it's Mike. Like, he's from like the Midlands. Like, he went to whatever for uni. Like, like his name's Chris. Like, no, his name's Mike. Like, what the hell is going on? And you bring them both up. You're like, are they twins or something? It's really a trip.
Wasn't it? I think I heard Chris say that people thought you were related to him. Like, as in,
what?
Like you were his, I don't know, uncle. I don't know. That you look similar. I don't know why that would be the case. Cause
what a grotesque insult to Chris Williamson, who's objectively an amazing looking man. Me, I'm something science kind of got halfway through, and then the evil genius like left and went on to other things. A Frankenstein monster, but minus like first industrial revolution vibes. Maybe like a fourth industrial revolution Frankenstein. Yeah.
Much more jacked though, at least.
I'd hope. You know, like Frankenstein, it's what an interesting thing. I don't want to take your time too much, Steve, and careen out of control, but like Frankenstein, the Frankenstein monster, that mythology was derived before hypermuscularity was a media thing. And so you've seen, like, if anyone listening to this Googles like action figures over the decades, it's wild. Like 1950s Superman just looked like a guy who, if you put a suit on him, would just be like a normal dude. And 1990s Superman looks juiced up. Modern Superman looks like straight up like he could step on stage anytime, and like he looks like Bumstead. And so that's all happened over the last 50, 60 years. Like various extremes have developed. So like when you look at Frankenstein, the monster, technically he's called Frankenstein's monster because the scientist is Frankenstein. Fuck all that. His name's Frankenstein. And he's big, but he's not like jacked. He doesn't have like bubbly muscles. And so it's kind of trippy to, like, you were like, oh, you're more jacked than Frankenstein. The first thing that came out of my head, I was like, no, I'm not. But then I'm like, oh, wait, I am. Weird. I'm more jacked than 30 Superman. Yeah, see? I just always think that's how Superman talks. And everyone talked like that in the 30s, I'm convinced. No more crime, see?
I think we all can absolutely relate to that, thinking about like the action figures, or I just think movie stars, like where they once were to like where they are now, and the extremes they have to go to. Like you get many Arnold Schwarzenegger was kind of like one of the first at the time of being like someone jacked, taking special roles, whereas now there's lots of guys doing that. Yes,
though I will say there's been an interesting, obviously comic books and artificial media, like people that don't exist that have to be drawn or animated or whatever, you can just purely express human desire with them. Like you can make them look like whatever. It's so funny too, because like back in when I was like about 10 or 12, someone showed me a few like actual X-Men comics. And the first thing I thought was like, this is straight up porn. Like Jean Grey got nipples the size of fucking pepperoni slices poking out her shell. What the hell is going on here? But it was like, whoa, these are really, really idealized people. And everyone had like veins and striations and all that stuff in the comics, which came a lot of times before the kind of visual, the movies and all that other stuff. But with real humans, I do believe, and I have zero data to support this, but this is a curious thing to maybe talk to one of the new AIs, Claude 3.5 or GPT. Actually, GPT-01 just came out. I was playing with it. It's kind of a fascinating thing, but it's fun to ask a GPT, like, as far as human beings and their muscularity, what has been the trend from, let's say, the 40s to the 80s? But then what has been the trend from the 80s to today? Because, like, Steve, a lot of 80s movies, bro, everyone was on gear. Sylvester Stallone was shredded to the bone. Arnold was everywhere. Hulk Hogan was coming up. I mean, tons and tons of jack dudes. Now you got like The Rock is always like The Rock. You got Chris Hemsworth, and then sort of like sometimes he's jacked, sometimes he's not. I mean, Batista is no longer jacked. He downsized for longevity, which I think is a real smart move. But like, there's not, so you can't, I don't think you can paint a picture that like body dysmorphia is at an all-time high through Hollywood in the 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. Because there's not been like a renaissance of everyone's jacked in the movies. James Bond's not jacked. There's tons of action stars that aren't remotely jacked. Whereas in the 80s, it was like the Commando era. Like you had, the 80s action star was a ripped shoulder and bicep, improperly hip holding an M60 machine gun. Sylvester Stallone did it in the Rambo movies. Arnold did it in like 18 movies. And that was the look. Like an action star almost had to like convince people with his presence alone that you're like, dude, shit's going to pop off. Jean-Claude Van Damme was in many roles in the 80s, jacked, shredded, and like that was the look. Whereas Steve, maybe I'm ranting to nowhere, but I can't, it's maybe hard for someone to say like, nah, man, the 2020s, like people in the movies are the most jacked they've ever been. Like, was that really true? What do you think?
Yeah, apart from The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and like you said, Chris Hemsworth, who I think in the latest Thor, I saw the latest Thor, Love and Thunder, I think it was, I saw him and he was topless. And I was just like, man, if this guy is not on some sort of stuff, he is like elite natural bodybuilding genetics. He should be stepping on stage because he was ginormous in that. Yeah. So yeah, like you said, sometimes, which makes me think, hey, he's like on and off or whatever's going on there. Sure. Why would these method actors not kind of use that? And then CGI comes into play. I think some CGI was in like the latest Deadpool Wolverine. So like there was times of which like Wolverine did not look human. It looked like animalistic kind of CGI through. Yes. So it's hard to know.
Some of the fight scenes you can't really do with human actors anymore because no humans can jump through the air 20 feet and double stab someone with their claws or whatever. I love that movie. I do like that they gave Wolverine justice. Like he can actually beat Deadpool every single time. It just takes him a while to really do a lot of damage. I remember when Deadpool like woke up inside of a car completely duct taped. Just like, oh shit, he really did incapacitate me. Like 18 stab wounds. It's intense. Yeah. The muscularity thing, I don't want to, there's all kinds of stuff to talk. It's funny. I was on the Diary of a CEO podcast recently, and at the end, he asked me a question. He had lots of surprise questions for me. I just never saw it coming. But one of the questions he asked was, what did you wish we had talked about that we didn't talk about or didn't talk about enough? And I was like, well, there's tons of stuff, but we did talk about muscle dysmorphia and body dysmorphia a lot on his show. And I said, like, we could do like another episode about that because it's a really interesting topic that has nuance from kind of many sides. And a lot of people only ever hear that topic brought up in kind of more left-wing academic circles where they're pre-prescribed quote unquote correct ideas about how you should be reasoning about the world and very politically incorrect things you don't want to admit. And of course, there's kind of the troll farm Instagram comments, right-wing side of like, hashtag just be alpha, everyone's a pussy, it's all excuses. And like both sides actually have some wisdom to bring and both sides are wrong about some stuff. So like that whole body dysmorphia, because typically the story with body dysmorphia and muscle dysmorphia has been, it's just getting worse and worse and it's getting out of control. And for men to try to be muscular, the action figure example, like that's what I learned in the early 2000s in uni. But nowadays it's just, I don't think you could really paint a picture that since the year 2000 Hollywood's just over indexed on muscle bodies that much more. But this is not true, I don't think. And so it leads to a more complex picture. It turns out that most guys don't actually want to look like Ronnie Coleman, and there's not a future in which most guys will want to look like Ronnie Coleman. It's kind of like you look at women and breast size, like artificial breast implants. We think like if you take a purely linear approach, I just want to look at bigger and bigger titties, man. That's it. But like you get a girl with like triple Z's, and almost everyone's going to be like, that's too much. Like, but I thought guys like breasts. It's also assuming that like women like just the biggest male genitals ever. It's like, after 9 inches, there's just you're just not going to work it into anything. And almost all women would be like, I'm good, man. I'm not trying to get torn into pieces today. And so that assumption of linearity and that assumption of things are always getting worse and we're careening down this hill of like everyone's going to want to be on steroids and weigh 280 and our kids are going to throw away their Harry Potter books and pick up Flex magazine, that does not play. And there's good reasons it doesn't play and all kinds of stuff to talk about. But anyway, I'm again just ranting to nowhere.
It makes me think of that bell curve. Like there's a certain degree that's great and then you drop off where it's diminishing returns, where actually being that large like breasts is just as bad as being completely flat chested.
100%. As a matter of fact, like I don't want to say too many politically incorrect things, but to an adult male, if a female has the right kind of look for the hips and the rest of the body, for most heterosexual males, breasts are like insanely secondary question. And if she just basically doesn't have them, like that can be hot in about 1 trillion different ways. If you have breasts that like stick out 3 feet in front of you and they're impossible to hide in every outfit, you just get the kind of attention that like I get for the shape of my head. People are just like, what the fuck is that? And no one's like, whoa, cool. Maybe a few people, but most are just like baffled. And if you're like, hey, like ladies, you like a masculine looking guy, right? Like, yeah, like, well, here's Dr. Mike's head. They're like, whoa. I didn't mean a block of meat. What the hell are you doing? Just the same way with like excessively large breasts. And so that assumption that like, there was also another assumption baked in, like, this was true for a while. Women just kept getting new skinnier and skinnier and skinnier role models in the various women's magazines through the 50s, 60s, 70s. And everyone thought like there was just going to keep going. And it didn't. Like the 90s, 2000s, 2010s. As a matter of fact, in the mid 2010s, I would say early to mid 2010s, the Kardashians alone kind of brought thickness back even higher. And you had a lot of girls that were like, hey, do you want to look like a skinny, coked out supermodel? They were like, I don't think anyone's ever wanted to look like that. Like, well, in the late 70s, we all did. Like, it's been a while since the late 70s. And I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but I think some of the instructors of cultural sociology and anthropology are folks who are, my age or older, and they've kind of just like, they're not super in touch with current popular culture. And they kind of assume like the trend they saw as a young person in the 60s, 70s, 80s kept going. And like, well, everyone just wants you to be stick thin. And is that really true? Like, are the Disney girls, are the singers, like, are the super popular models, are the girls that date celebrities, are the Instagram girls, are they ultra thin even compared to decades before? And the answer is like, first of all, there's a lot of variety. It's just tons and tons of people on the internet, but also like, man, not really. Like the world's most popular female fitness influencer isn't someone who weighs like 90 pounds or some shit like that, which would have been the prediction of many people in the mid 90s who were like, dude, bad things are happening. We're just reinforcing thinness all the time. It turns out that humans kind of like what humans like, and culture has a tendency to be able to offer them some visual media and reinforcement that pushes boundaries. But boundaries can only be pushed so much until you're just like, I'm good. Like, for example, if you tell people, listen, we're going to give you half a pound of food for $10 at a restaurant. They're like, amazing. And they're like, okay, a pound and a half. They're like, oh my God, this is incredible. They're like, okay, 5 pounds. Like, wait, like that's like 10 people's worth of food. Like, okay, do you want it? Like, no, like, I don't even want to take that much in a to-go bag. This is just too much. And at some point you just can't push the limits anymore. And that's a good thing, I think, because it prevents society from getting psychotically extreme. Now, obviously some people will get extreme, but I think it maybe cools some people's jets of the kind that will be like, for example, like people on both sides of political aisle tend to freak out over like gender stuff. They're like, pretty soon we're not going to have any genders or some shit like that. And it's like, most people kind of know where they stand on that. And they're just trying to be a bit more inclusive. It's not this crazy thing. Like, obviously tons of people are out as trans or whatever kind of mixture of stuff nowadays. But at the same time, like, that phenomenon itself is stabilizing. So the idea that none of us are going to have any genders tomorrow, that extrapolation, is just not true. The same thing with works kind of more close to home for our little area. Body image, body dysmorphia, diet culture. Do you remember all the diet culture wars? Like, I remember being accused in the mid 2010s of like, the fact that I was recommending counting macros made me a shill for like the eating disorder industry. I was like, whoa, interesting if true. But it turned out that like the just bushels of people who used macros and apps and got mega eating disorders just never showed up. That was like my one of my professors, my major professor in my PhD program, Dr. Mike Stone. He had like one response to steroid hysterics. Now he was like, drug-free sport, all that stuff, Olympic stuff, but he knew how the real world worked. And he goes, in the late 80s, we all realized that the anti-steroid hysteria was pretty much nonsense. And I was like, how? He's like, there weren't any bodies. Nobody was dying in the gym. No, all the guys we knew that were dying were like dudes that drank 5 gallons of whiskey and did 80 pounds of coke a night, and they happened to be pro wrestlers, and they also did steroids. There just wasn't people dropping off. And that whole thing about diet culture and thinness and all that stuff, if these social media waves were as powerful as people had feared, you would see some stats, bro, on just girls doing crazy. There are a group of girls. Unfortunately, there will always be a group of guys that will always be at risk for this kind of imagery. They're going to do the wrong things. Like the trend, the teenage trend, sounds strange to say, the trend, like the TikTok trend people. And that's so bombastic and so salacious and so stand out that I was even interviewed for an article at like major newspaper or magazine that just came out all about the trend phenomenon. That it's like, it's cool cannon fodder for journalists as well as it should be, but it's just not this crazy mass out of control phenomenon. Like, I deal with plenty of teens. Most of them are broccoli haired motherfuckers that play Minecraft or just, they're like 110 pounds. A lot of them don't even give a shit about lifting. So, well, they shouldn't, it's just easy for us to say like, oh my God, we're spinning out of control and body dysmorphia. And for now, at least, it seems relatively stable and more like when you have access to all this media, some people are going to go down the route of body dysmorphia and some just won't. And I'm really curious for future research about who happens to be more at risk, because I think it's much more important to find the people at risk for anorexia nervosa, for muscle dysmorphia, and meet them where they are versus doing like grand social engineering or like your body doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with your value. Hypermuscularity is overvalued. Like, but to some people, they really like it, but some people are going to take it too far. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like if someone's like at risk for, various like disorders, like let's say like, precipitated by loneliness, you're going to want to find those people and tell them like, it's good to have a good, strong friend circle. Here's how to reach out to people. Here's how to talk to a chatbot if you feel really lonely. Whereas if not everyone needs to hear that, because most people are like, dude, if I just got rid of my friends for 2 days, my life would be so much fucking simpler. For 2 days, I could just get some fucking sleep. So I think it's, however, one last quick, super quick rant. Finding people who are at high risk for body dysmorphia of various kinds. On the female side, usually anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa. On the male side, usually muscle dysmorphia. You got to do it real gingerly and communicate it gingerly, because it can really quickly seem like you're blaming the victim. Because you can be like, well, it's because of XYZ factors that you're anorexic. That might be true statistically, but this is still a real human being. And you got to meet them where they are and also acknowledge that their perspective is a truly felt perspective. Like, one of the things I hate about people who like dismiss muscle dysmorphia as like the stupid thing you should just abandon, or anorexia, is they'll be like, well, it's no longer attractive for you to be this muscular, this thin, or like, it's not healthy. Like, it's stupid. Nobody wants it. It's like, it's all nice. Why don't you ask the person how they feel? You ask the person how they feel, you get a different perspective, and some of it is valid. They're like, I feel more empowered when I'm more muscular. What are you going to do? Debate that? Of course it's true. So now you got to say, like, yes, well, on the one hand, that's good. Let's talk about the costs and the benefits. Like, yes, if you're a girl who's thin, some guys like the look. A lot of girls get jealous and they like the look. You might like yourself better when you're thin. If we admit all of that, and then we talk about, okay, now those are serious upsides. And I have no problem with you being thin. I think it's a fucking cool look. Now, me personally, you guys, the people on the internet have seen my wife thin. I don't even notice thin girls. Be like, sorry, man, you need to gain about 80 pounds to get fucked back to me. Otherwise, I can't detect you on my sex radar. But like, a lot of people like that look. You have to, when people are like, I like this look, this thin look, you're going to be like, yeah, I feel that. But let's talk about the upsides of looking how you like and the downsides of like, do you really want to die? Like, for real die? Most people are like, if you sit them down, they're like, no, I don't. Like, okay, that's why you don't do heroin, right? And they're like, yeah, correct. Yeah, I've seen too many movies. Like, okay, so just understand there are some perilous things in this journey that you might take with your physique that if you take them too far, you're going to for real die. And that's a different discussion versus that top-down 1950s educational style of just say no to drugs, and the whole class nods together and writes it down in the notebook. I don't think that works really well.
No. Yeah.
Did you get anti-drug propaganda when you were a middle schooler and stuff?
Is that that's the whole something about dare? Like,
dare, shit like that. Yeah. Resist, dare to resist drugs and violence. As if resisting violence is something you have a choice in, whatever.
I don't remember having too much of that actually in the UK. Maybe I missed it, or I don't know. I'm probably a bad example of this because I had such limited exposure to any sort of drugs. I've not done anything. I've not even smoked a damn cigarette, which is probably blasphemy for a European, right? But
you're not European. I'll just tell you that right now. You're going to get your EU paperwork rescinded because you just haven't smoked a cigarette. They're like, you're trying to get across the border. Like, are you European? You're like, yes. Listen to my voice. Like, prove it. They give you a cigarette. You're like, oh my God, I'm never getting back home.
The parallel it made me think of, because I'm a little bit in this space marginally because I have some tattoos, and so do you. In fact, it's like body modification, right? People go to extremes with body modification to the point I don't know if that lends itself to a dysmorphia, but to the point where it could be unhealthy for them, where they modify their ability to breathe, or it means it has obstructions towards getting jobs, or I don't know, seeing their children at a high school play, they can't be in the room because they're now frightening people. I've seen examples of this. So it makes me think of that. And I think that's very abundantly obvious to people that you can take body modification too far, but maybe not so much when it's just like changing your body through, like, you're still changing the physical appearance, but not in a quite as an extreme way.
Yes. And tattoos are typically described as dangerous to the human getting them. Though the sociological consequences are interesting, I am really, really I have a positive attitude about tattoos and what it says about our culture. Back in basically, the older the person you talk to, and the more like non-developed world, like my parents are from Soviet Union, my wife's parents are from the Philippines, the more the individual is older and generally not from the modern world, the more they look at people who have tattoos as like, because this person is criminally inclined, or at least like sexually unethical. And it sounds fucked up because you're like, whoa, like you don't know this person at all. But the thing is, like, let's cut these people some slack. Back in the 1960s and 70s, if you had a shitload of tattoos, there was a much higher probability that you were a criminal than any other thing about someone who was identical to you but did not have any tattoos. Like, if you were a gambling person, you're like, I'm not asking you to bet if this is a criminal or not. I'm asking you to bet if there's a higher probability that they're criminal given that they have tattoos all over their body. You're like, yeah, I'm going to say yes. And that used to be true in a big way, like, because most people understood that tattoos communicate toughness and crassness and subculture and crime. That's kind of like why they used to wear them or used to have them, that you were sending a clear message. Almost everyone in Russia that had tattoos got them in prison, and it means they were like a thief a thief under the law, like some John Wick type of shit. And so if you saw someone like tattoos on their fingers in Russia anywhere before the 90s, you were like, that's for sure a criminal. Like in the literal sense, that's how they marked themselves. So you can understand why people back in the day thought that, but it's always really enlightening to me how nowadays more and more and more, like having a body full of tattoos, most young people, they don't think much of you at all with that. They're like, yeah, like my dad's partner-in-law has a back tattoo of a fucking dragon. I don't fucking, I guess like 50. He's not a fucking criminal. You know, so many people have tattoos. It doesn't mean everyone or even a majority of people do. It just means like the average person has run into so many people with tattoos that are like Joe Jeffrey. Joe Jeffrey is tatted all up. And if you talk to him, you're like, oh my God, this guy's really fucking smart and calm. Like I was expecting him to yell at me and crack a beer over my head, but he's not doing that. Nowadays, young people, they don't even expect that. And so I think the diversity of how people can look, but what they are expected to behave like is now so high. A lot of people don't even like try to form heuristics. They're like, I don't know what the fuck this person's all about. I've met plenty of clean cut folks that are pieces of shit. I've met plenty of tattooed degenerates that are really awesome people. I'm just not really willing to put my hand down and be like, all right, this person's for sure a criminal. Where back in the day, that was just something you could reliably do much more. And that's even true with college education or not. Now you can learn so much on the internet. Someone who never went to college, they could be fucking on it, like super sharp and know a ton of stuff. Whereas before, like Steve, in the 1960s, if you don't go to college, unless you spent like tons of time at the public library, like you just knew way fewer things about the world. So when someone was like, oh, he didn't graduate from college, that's not someone I want you to marry, there was like a lot more validity back then. Now everything's so diverse and people can follow their own way. It's almost a beautiful thing to watch and be like, oh, this is so great. But it happened in an organic way. Like I don't ever remember being proselytized by leftists that don't judge people by their tattoos. Like they never said that. People just kind of stopped doing it to a large extent because they were like, I don't know, man, a bunch of my friends have tattoos. Same idea with like smoking marijuana. Like almost everyone's been around people that smoke marijuana. Did I ever tell you my cocaine story, Steve?
You might have, but let's hear it again. I don't actually know if I have.
This is great to clip out. So people are like, oh my God, he did do cocaine. He lied on that other show. I walked in. So I had all the drug education, right? And I believed it. Like I was like, drug people are degenerates. And I remember walking into another university party that wasn't my uni. It was a different uni. A friend went there. I walked into a party and it was like a hangout still before the big party started. And I watched this girl, she was chatting and then she just took a massive fucking line right off the table. And I was like, oh my, I was 19 years old. In my head, I was thinking like, this bitch is about to lose it and go nuts. And I don't even know what's going to happen. Like this is crazy time. And all she did was just continue to talk to the people around her calmly for the next 30 minutes and then did nothing at all. And I was like, did somebody lie to me? I thought she was going to run out into traffic, pick up a knife from the kitchen, start speaking in tongues. And it was just like someone who was just chatty. She wasn't even that chatty. I was like, I'm chattier than this woman off of cocaine. And I was like, yes, cocaine is terrible. Health consequences are disastrous. To put this, so it doesn't look like I'm recommending cocaine to younger viewers. I had a friend who knew a guy who was kind of the local coke dealer in her part of Spain. And he actually farmed coke, believe it or not. And by the time he was 40, he had had like 8 heart attacks. Wow. And he was not obese, regular sized, thin person, like just did a lot of coke. And it catches up. Coke doesn't even catch up to you. It catches up to you in like a few months or a few years. That's not a long time range. But I remember that changed my opinion about judging people and stuff, because like if I was in a class with that girl, you'd be like, is she a cokehead? I'd be like, no, she doesn't look like a crackhead drug addict. But like, oh, actually, she does coke on the weekends. You're like, oh, I can't tell anything anymore. And, you know, super clean cut. What is it? American Psycho types. They're on coke all the time, and you never can tell. So, I guess the end rant here is like, especially with tattoos and stuff like that, I'm really glad we're at a point where more and more people are just kind of getting to that Martin Luther King bullshit, judging people by the content of their character rather than what they look like. Simply just being a rational person who knows statistics and know like, judging people by their looks used to be much more dependable. This is not that dependable anymore. There's just way too many exceptions.
Yeah. Seeing the world becoming a bit less discriminatory is a great thing, I think. Even for like, you had to previously, I know when I was going to uni still, it was a case of you want to go to like a red brick university because employers will look at you favorably and they won't even look at other universities. Whereas now the best and up and coming companies who are keeping up to date aren't probably so worried about that. They just want the best individual for the job. That could be someone that didn't go to uni.
100%. Yeah. Corporations are profit and loss enterprises. What matters to them is that you can generate value. And if you come in with a big uni behind you and you don't generate value, your Harvard degree is fucking totally useless. Like, it's literally just a piece of paper when you show up to your first day working at Amazon or something. But if you went to another school, you did really well in the interviews, your job that you worked at before, they were like, yeah, he's fucking stellar, and really pissed he's leaving. You get on that staff, and no one, say this for younger folks listening, it's insanely important to people in late high school and university age where you went to uni. And it's also important to people a few years after school. But I tell you this, in the real working world, where you went to university fucking will never come up after age 26. Just nobody cares. Outside of like, you know, like water cooler or bar after the office, pub after the office banter, where they're like, oh, where'd you go to school? Like, it just perfunctory nonsense that, oh, like, well, my friend Chelsea went there. Like, as far as like, oh, where'd you go to school? And that's going to promote you. As soon as you have your first job, the only thing future employers look at is like, how did you do that first job? Like, it's nice that you went to school. Oh, it was Harvard. That's cool. How'd you do with that first job? So if the answer wasn't good, they're going to be like, oh, it's a Harvard guy. Like, he got fired from his last job. You're like, yeah, fuck him. We're good. So a lot of that stuff matters way, way less than people think after the fact.
For sure. I did want to touch on you because you said on the Diary of a CEO, you wanted to talk about muscle and body dysmorphia. And the thing I wanted to see if there's any kind of practical tips for the listeners where you could be like, they could be aware of if they're at risk of either of those things. They might be listening and there might be some symptoms that they might currently have that indicate that they need to be careful with what they're currently doing. Is there things they can kind of look at in themselves?
I would say two things are good things to look for. Thing number one is, can you be realistic about your body if someone really sits you down and asks? And you have to be able to switch contexts too. So someone could sit me down and go, compared to national level bodybuilders in the US, NPC bodybuilders in the masters division, how do you look? I mean, yeah, I'm like middle of the pack. I stack up okay. Like, I'll get in the first call out, or I'll like win the second call out or something. I'm a fine bodybuilder. If I said I'm extremely amazing, you'd be like, wrong. If I said I was like way out of my league, it'd be like, so how do you think the guys you beat every year when you go to nationals feel? Idiot. And that's also insulting to your competitors. So in the bodybuilding frame, I kind of know what my body's doing. But then it's really, really important for someone to be able to sit down in a normal human frame and tell themselves what they look like. Because the normal human frame, the average person, you know, people like, just think of like south side of England, beach towns, mid-July, people with their families. You take your shirt off. To anyone who thinks they might have muscle dysmorphia, who's been training a while, etc., I would love a conversation with them where they tell me how they look compared to the average person. That tells me a lot. Because if you're like, look, compared to the average person, like a fucking superhero, it's not likely they have muscle dysmorphia in the conventional sense. Because they're able to very, very lucidly describe, like, okay, I'm actually really jacked. But like compared to the top guys, I'm comparing myself. I ain't shit. You know, like, what's his name? John Jewett posts an update picture and I fucking think I never ever trained before. And Steve Hall posts his arms and I'm like, I'm taking all these drugs and Steve's arms are still bigger than mine. So like, yeah, okay, fine. Instagram culture is a different thing. But in the real world, if someone can tell you like, no, I actually like, I feel small around regular people and they're like 170 with ripped abs, you're like, okay, we need to get you familiar with what real people look like. And we need you to imbibe it in your soul that you are actually really jacked compared to regular people. If you literally can't see that and can't admit it, there's some conversations you could be having with yourself or a therapist or friends and family that could really try to bring attention to the fact that, that your perception is decidedly skewed in a way that is just not objective anymore. The other thing I would say is a little bit of a canary in the coal mine for muscle dysmorphia is, how do you deal with progress? Do you recognize that you're progressing, or is your view simply that you're kind of working against the clock and you're not progressing nearly as fast as you could or should be, or that you actually aren't really getting a lot of progress? So for example, like if, we get someone and they finally get to 180 pounds with like abs, and they've been training for a long time, and they used to be 160 with like a faint kind of tummy, and you're like, how do you feel about your progress? If they're like, okay, like real talk, I'm always striving for more. But if I had to say, like, yeah, man, like I've come a long way. If they can say that, it's less likely they have muscle dysmorphia. If they're like, dude, I honestly feel like I haven't made any progress at all. And like, in a sense, I know on the numbers I'm bigger, but like, I feel like I'm even further behind. Yeah, you got some stuff to think about that. Now, everyone's answer is going to really depend on sort of like what time of their lives it is, what time of the day, of the year, of etc. You catch some people on a bad day, they're going to tell you they look like shit. But the real question is, after you sit them down, give them a cup of coffee, chat with them about something else, really calmly thread back into those two questions of, how do you really stack up against regular people? And how do you stack up against older versions of yourself? If they look like I'm way more jacked than a regular person and I'm like always improving, I just kind of want more improvement, they're just somebody who wants to get jacked. They don't have fucking muscle dysmorphia. Now, I've talked to people before who were like, I know that I'm really jacked, but when I'm around regular people, I feel smaller than everyone. Okay. Yeah, that's a conversation topic. Because like, I'm not like, okay, but compared to the regular person, I'm like, compare to the regular bodybuilder, I'm pretty jacked. Compare to the regular person, like I'll go to the mall and I'll wear like a cutoff, and everyone stares at me almost 100% of the time. It's something I become aware of, and I'm like, oh, it's like everyone's looking at me. Like, one of the things my wife and I really love to do is like people watch, just like seeing, we call it the greatest show on earth. Real humans in the wild, greatest show on earth. You can't write fucking Hollywood movies that are as good, because the unpredictability is wild. The patterns, the relations, the body types, the dress types, the behavior patterns, the whole thing. But like, I can't really do that much because I'm the show no matter where I go. Like Jared and Crystal and I went to Thailand, and we walk down the street, like this mini street in Bangkok, which is all brothels, like exclusively prostitutes and places for you to do prostitute things with. And I was kind of like, oh my God, this is so exciting. Like, I've never been in a place like this. What a trip. So the first thing I realized was I have to clutch my wife's hand really hard. And I have to like just like in 7th grade, for the first time in I don't know how long, I couldn't look women in the eyes, because if you look them in the eyes, they immediately think you're interested, and they come and try to physically pull you into the whorehouse. I'm like, okay. That. So dude, it's the worst, because you're trying to be like, look, you look great. I'm not here to do this. So please. And they don't take the immediate please. They're like, it's like a drunk dude hitting on a girl, but in reverse. And I'm like, man, this is what hot girls put up with? No wonder they don't go to clubs anymore. Like, for the 5th time, get the fuck off of me. And they'll try to take your hand and bring you over. So that was one thing I learned. Was like, you can't look people in the eyes. But the other thing was like, I wanted to kind of be like a fly on the wall and just see like, whoa, like, how does this world work? It didn't work. Because not only did all of the prostitutes see, it was me and Jared, okay? And the Jared people look at and they're like, what the fuck? And then in addition to that, almost all of the tourists that were walking through there to also see hookers, they were looking at us. And I was like, God damn it. So if I told you I'm like not as muscular as everyone else, you'd be like, you're really unwell. And there are some people that kind of similar to me in size that deep down in their souls feel small and also feel incredibly pessimistic about their progress. That is the kind of person that might ignore some blood work, that take some drugs they would regret, that push their body weight to sky high limits, that do all kinds of stuff that might cost them longevity and might cost them quality of life and might cost them acute, problems. And more than that, it's a person you can't trust their genuine intuition about what they're going to do next, because it's unmoored from reality. Like if you're like checking on your friends who are like like doing mushrooms or something, like to see if everyone's good. And it's bright, sunny day outside. You're like, guys, what do you think about the sun? They're like, it's the middle of the night. You're like, oh, you guys are still really high. Like, they're like, hey, can we drive the car? You'd be like, hell no, you can't even tell what time of the day it is. So with people that can't tell that they're muscular and can't tell that they're making progress, legitimately, like that's how they feel, allowing them, we don't control these people's lives. Let me rephrase that. Intervening and chatting with them on a human level and trying to get them some help to re-architect their view to be more objective might be a good idea versus just, especially if they're people close to you, friends, family, relatives, things like that, people you care about. That might be a better idea than just being like, nah, fuck him, let him take all the drugs he wants. Like, I feel like if Joe Jeffrey tells you how many drugs to take, you're probably going to be good. But if you come from a deep well of I'm not jacked at all, you might kind of take all the drugs. And, that road ends at the end with Rich Piana. And, it's a weird thing to go down. And
yeah. It makes me think, Mike, I'm sure you've heard it in interviews of like professional bodybuilders, like Olympian athletes who will say they're bad genetics. They're like, I have bad genetics. It's like, dude, for you to be where you got to, it's impossible. It's an impossibility. You can't be a rational person to think you have bad genetics to get there. Yeah. I wonder if that's that's kind of an indication.
It could
something ain't quite there.
It could be. I'll see. There's two sides that I can look at, two perspectives I can take on the bad genetics thing, because I've heard that all the time. One side is exactly your side. It's like, dude, you must be out of your mind. You weigh 280 and you have striated glutes. Who has good genetics then? 100%. And for some of those folks, if they really need it in that way, yeah, that's not a good sign. But I think a lot of bodybuilders speak in such a deep contextual niche that you'd have to pull them out of it first for them to tell you what they really think about them compared to the average person. Because a lot of bodybuilders say, like, yeah, compared to Keon Pearson, I have bad genetics. So do all of us. But the thing is, when you're in the top 10 at the 212, like, you're on the fucking, you're posing against Keon. So it's actually true to say that you might not have the greatest genetics. And some guys on shape and on symmetry and on kind of muscle bellies, for where they are in the pro ranks, they do have bad genetics. And they'll be the first to admit it. Branch Warren, bad genetics. Like for shape, bad genetics. Branch Warren took second at the Mr. Olympia contest. If he ever won, you would still be able to say, like, because of all the Mr. Olympias, the shape genetics aren't that great. I mean, Kai Green, compared to Phil Heath, had bad shape genetics, if you think about it. What the hell? Kai Green's a superhero. So a lot of bodybuilders, when it's totally in context and they're aware of it, they'll be like, look, yeah, compared to the guys I'm competing against, I don't have good genetics for this shit. Compared to a regular person, like, yeah, I weighed 240 after my sophomore year of high school and shit like that. And a lot of times people also, they don't want to say they have good genetics because it seems like a brag, like a flex. And it can come off weird, especially to the untrained ear. And I think a lot of times what they're also trying to say is, I had to earn this shit like everybody else. I remember like, who was it, Janae Kroc, formerly Matt Kroc? I might be misattributing this to her, but somebody in that era said, I never heard I had good genetics until I won the world championships. And then everyone told me I had good genetics. Up until then, I was just some person, and I was bigger and bigger and bigger. And it seemed like my genetics got better the more jacked and strong I got. But I started at like 170 pounds in college, and nobody ever said I had good genetics. Like, it's different than when you're like that 10-year-old with abs and biceps, and you've literally heard you had good genetics your whole life. But like now for you, Steve, people look at your arms and your overall physique, especially from like kind of your front facing side tricep pose, and it's just like a work of art. I'm sure you get it a lot. Like, yeah, but your genetics, you'd be like, motherfucker, have you ever seen that picture of me when I was 15? Nobody ever told me I had good genetics back then. The other thing is, though, genetics do mature with time. Your ability to hold tons of muscle later in life is genetically determined, and genetics have more and more of an effect over time, and environment less and less. So you kind of grow into the person you're supposed to be. So it might be true that back in the day, the genotypic expression, or sorry, the phenotypic expression of your genetics wasn't that impressive, but your genetics plus 10 years of training plus good eating, now you look amazing. Some people, 10 years of starting where you did, 10 years of good eating and training, they wouldn't end up where you were, and that would be because of their genetics. So it would be more complicated, but yeah, that really, to me, it's how does the bodybuilder mean that? So then I would sit the bodybuilder down and be like, okay, do you mean good? You have bad genetics compared to like your brother-in-law that you see on Thanksgiving, or are you talking about compared to like the guys on the Olympia stage? And usually they'd be like, oh, I don't even think about regular people. And I'd be like, oh, what about compared to regular people? They're like, well, I don't know. They've never really done like years of gear and lifted weights. And like, oh, but really, like, compared to the guys you came up with in the gym, you're like, yeah, I mean, I was like 250 with striated glutes, like after like Phil. Can you imagine Phil Heath's story? Luckily, Phil Heath's never said he had bad genetics. His nickname is the Gift. Like, Phil Heath, like 3 years after he started lifting, he was like contending for the Mr. Olympia. Like, there's only so many stories you can tell yourself about how that works or doesn't work. Jay Cutler put on 50 pounds of muscle in his first year of training, drug free. And people don't believe that. I believe it. That's the tip of the spear of amazing genetics. Yeah. Big Ramy, if he was never on drugs, could have probably stepped on stage at about 245 pounds with striated glutes, completely drug-free. But then people, I used to get pushback for this. Back in the old Facebook days, Steve, I used to post that idea, and I get tons of people like, you're delusional, blah, blah, blah. But like, well, he stepped on stage with striated glutes at 315. So like, how much of an effect do you think steroids really have? Then the ultimate, like, I've never made this response to anyone because it's preposterous, but I like it when the bros tell like the nerds who are like, oh, it's all steroids. Like, try them then. Start doing them. See what happens. Obviously, you're not going to change your whole life and take illegal drugs to prove a point. But for people that have taken steroids, in the real world, the average feedback is, it's not that they're underwhelming. It's just not as gigantic of an instant of a transformation as you would think. And once you've gone up to 1 gram or 2 grams of total gear for a while, that's most of the muscle you'll gain, even if you go up to 6 or 7 grams, you just have extra side effects for no reason. So it's kind of like people think you start steroids, you're just going to blow up and everyone's going to be 300 pounds. A lot of guys get to 210 pounds, and the more gear they take, the more fat they gain and the more their blood pressure goes up, and then now they have sleep apnea. So they really can't realistically weigh much more on stage than 200 pounds with all the gear in the world. And they're like, oh, God damn it. And then you look at Big Ramy, who was 315 at various very decent conditioning. He was better conditioned at 300 and 290, but he was on stage at 315 pounds at 1.1 Olympia with striated glutes, like as seen. And then you tell that person after 10 years of doing steroids and topping out at their best stage weight might have been 197. Like, okay. So what do you think about Big Ramy's genetics now? They're like, I mean, fuck, like, there's just no steroid to take me from 200 pounds to 315 after I've been at this for so goddamn long. And that's just genetics at that point. And, there's obviously shape genetics and everything else, but just on sheer size alone, naturals are capable of a lot. We did a video a while back with Brian DaCosta, who was at the time the world champ of natural bodybuilding. I mean, I stood next to the guy, talked to him. He was like 215 pounds when we trained, and
still pretty lean,
normal standards, very lean and just incredible shape. And it's like, yeah, this is what this looks like. And if Brian DaCosta at like 5'9" can be 215 pretty lean, you guys don't think that Big Ramy at like 5'11" can be really lean at 260? Like, Big Ramy, if you ever seen him in real life, it's a different skeleton size than most people. And so people's credulity starts to kind of get adjusted to that. But all back into the conversation of realism is contextual, but if in context you're unmoored from reality, it's a conversation to have, because you can leave it alone with friends and family, but you should just know that you're leaving alone something that, if your friend thinks right is left and left is right, there are like real driving situations that could get them in trouble. And if your friend thinks that like they're not even scratching the surface of how muscular they need to be, and they're already taking grams and grams of shit and their health is a question mark, they might not stop anytime soon. And a lot of times these guys will have, one of the biggest things with muscle dysmorphia is people have trouble coming off or coming down. Like, they'll like the look they have at 1 gram or 2 grams of gear. They'll come back to 250 TRT and they're going to be like, fuck this. And a week later, they're back on the crazy shit. Whereas people without muscle dysmorphia, they'll come down and be like, yeah, I definitely look smaller, but I still look pretty sweet. Like right now, I've been on 250 for like 8 weeks. I look fucking cool, man. I'm actually like, so I weigh like 235 pounds. And I can still see my sartorius when I flex my leg musculature. And I haven't trained my legs in 2 months. And I have like striated glutes at 235 on TRT. And I'm like, all right, this definitely could have gone worse. Do I look as good as I did earlier in the summer when I was ripped? No. But like, I know all that stuff. Like, for the condition that I'm in, I think I look great. But if you don't make that adjustment, if you're like, dude, I just always want to look my best, then even that's not good enough. Like, my best look is me just barely beginning to be sort of happy with how I look. Especially if objectively you look fucking sweet. Man, yeah, that's tough. And those people absolutely exist. And social media, back to the conversation from earlier of finding these folks, targeting them with conversation. Social media is a real double-edged sword for these people. Because Steve, if you're jacked and lean, you don't feel jacked and lean, but everyone you see in daily life is smaller than you. Everyone always gives you props. You kind of start to think you're like your little mini superhero in your own head, and that kind of heal a lot of wounds and actually make you feel pretty jacked, even if like as a kid you didn't feel jacked and made you feel bad. But if your Instagram feed is exclusively full of top NPC and IFBB folks at their best, if you're the average person, it just doesn't affect you. Like, all right, sweet, that guy's jacked, cool, next, swipe. If you're a person with muscle dysmorphia risk and you're in that not so great headspace, it could be an argument for having a different media account on which you follow like dog and cat videos instead of muscle people.
Really well said. The genetics discussion, I think, is really interesting, especially that part where you mentioned it can sometimes take a while to express them. I think that's underappreciated by a lot of people, and they could be giving up on things that maybe they love, that they're like, oh, I just have no genetic proclivity towards this. But if they just gave it a bit longer, I think of myself, like, again, I wouldn't say I have when I started, I thought maybe I had bad genetics, but now I'm like, I definitely can't have bad genetics. For bodybuilding specifically, definitely not the best. There's definitely people with way smaller waists. There's people like Brian DaCosta, but I'm certainly not bad.
Yeah, but almost everyone has smaller arms than you too, and almost everyone's in worse conditioning than you too. So you're purposely picking. As far as I can tell, objectively, your physique has two downsides. One, from the front, your waist is like just physically larger, and your quads are kind of like just straight up and down. They don't puff out to the side like Jared's do. Other than that, everything on your body is just straight up enviable. And your arms are straight up like off of someone who weighs like 80 pounds more than you or some shit like that. And if there's one, you've seen the RP, how to get the best physique for for getting laid or whatever. Like, big arms are never the wrong answer. They're always correct. So I understand contextually exactly what you mean. I've seen your comparison photos. I've seen your quads, etc. Yeah, there's like a real thing there. It's just like, shucks, we're not Jared Feather. But also you have a shitload going for you. And you're still saying that like, well, my genetics are this and that, and you're really well adjusted. Imagine having your genetics, Steve, but always feeling deep down like you're the smallest fucking person in the room, and even not even thinking your arms are impressive. You'd be on fucking 2 grams of drugs right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's sad to hear and see that. And the thing I was wondering was, for those individuals who maybe are on that muscle dysmorphia, I'm guessing they can see it in other people though. So they wouldn't look at a Jared Feather and be like, you're also small, or they'd look at you and say you're small, what have you. They can recognize like rationally in other people, or do they also see, like they see themselves in that dysmorphic manner, they also apply that to others too?
That's a really, really good question. Part one is I'm not sure. There could be people that just appraise everyone as smaller. Part two is there are definitely a subset of people that perceive everyone else as really impressive, but themselves as not impressive at all. That's another sign to look for. If someone's like, dude, Jared, like literally I've seen like people like physically bigger than Jared be like, dude, you're the fucking man. Your physique's just crazy. And Jared's like, dude, look at you. And they're like, I ain't shit. And it's like, but you're bigger than me. I look up to you. And they're like, no, don't say that. And it's like, I get it. Jared has that magic to his physique, the crazy lines in the waist and the bubble muscles and stuff. But like, when Jared and I posed down together back in the day, this is not true anymore. I was just total freak. But like, I outmuscled Jared for years. I knew I was more tank-like than Jared. So when Jared would say like, dude, you're more jacked than me, I'd be like, yeah, there's a sense in which that's true. I would never be like, nah, man. Because if I was like, no way, you're just all around bigger than me, he'd be like, are you dumb or something? Do your rear lat spread. There's no more sun in the sky. That's all stuff that you earned, right? that is definitely a concern when someone can't even objectively appraise other people, and to them, a TikToker who weighs 165 with a nice little angle on the shoulder, they're like, dude, that guy's huge. Like, no, he's not. You must be losing. And again, we all have bad days where we think we ain't shit, everyone's jacked. But if you're consistently of that mindset, yeah, it's a thing you want to think about.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We create the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. Additionally, you get access to our exclusive Revive Stronger member site, where you'll be able to watch over hundreds of hours worth of educational content. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
One of my concerns with that was, if they're a coach in the industry and they can't objectively assess other people's physiques and maybe objectively think they're, nothing, small, what have you, they might, especially if they're in the enhanced side, give them protocols that are putting not only themselves at risk, now they're putting others at risk. It just made me think, could that, I don't know, imagine even as a natural bodybuilder, like you have a client in prep and that you look at them and they're completely diced to the socks. Mm-hmm. You're just like, there's more body fat to come off. They increase cardio, reduce food, what have you. It could just, I wonder if that could ever happen.
Seems like it does from some of the coaches I've worked with or interacted with. Yeah. I suspect that most people with muscle dysmorphia, it's an intensely personal thing. It applies to themselves. And a lot of times it's that weird twisted thing of they actually think everyone else is way more jacked than they are. And one of the reasons I know this is we all have elements. We all have bad days. And sometimes I'll see some guy at the gym. I was like, holy shit, that guy's huge. And then we'll be in the mirror together doing exercise and I'll be like, oh shit, I'm a fucking monster. I guess from a certain angle, he looked really impressive. It's just if you have mostly feelings like that and not a lot of feelings the other way, yeah, you've got a kind of a jaded perspective. I think really quick, sometimes people don't take the time. And this is something I ended up saying a little bit on the Diary of a CEO thing. People don't take the time to really be thoroughly impressed with their own results and be thoroughly washed over in the beautiful, warm light of their accomplishments. Even if that accomplishment is like, you kind of like showered and getting ready for a party in your late 20s and like you put on like one of your tight shirts and you're like, fuck, I look goddamn unbelievable. Like, people have guilt about that. It's not something you want to express often to friends and acquaintances. It seems cocky. It's not something you want to put on social media too much because, like, geez, they'll just tear you apart. And the reality is, like, those elements of really absorbing your own awesomeness can, I think, really potentially heal some deeper wounds of feeling less than, feeling not jacked enough. And if you really absorb the beauty of how you look and the wonderful thing you're building, then not only does it make the journey more fun, less running away from being small, more running towards being jacked, but also it really starts to heal some kind of elements of muscle dysmorphia in you that we all have sort of in that stew of ours. Because if you've never cut yourself any slack, then who the fuck is going to cut you slack? And you won't even believe them when they cut you slack because there's people just being nice. Like, I've had people give me compliments about my physique at competitions where I like had a really poor showing, and I'm like, you just like Dr. Mike or whatever, on TV. And he's a nice guy on TV. Like, you don't have to tell me I look good. I know I don't. And sometimes they honestly mean I look good because to them, everyone on the bodybuilding stage looks amazing. And they're like, no, you really did. And I have to be like, yes, okay, this person is coming from normal context. This is how this makes sense. But if during my good times, when I have crazy chest pump at the gym with amazing lighting, if all I see is flaws and negatives and I can't see the enormity of what I'm building, then like, it's a really good idea for me to meditate on that and to really cut myself some fucking slack. Like, you'll meet every now and again, you'll meet like a hot girl in life, wherever you are in your life journey, and you'll talk to her for some time, get to know her, and you realize like she actually almost never feels attractive. And you're like, you idiot, everyone wants it and the rest of them are lying. And she's like, no, like that guy, like, he's never going to say yes to me. And you're just like, I see, you're fucking delusional. But for them, a lot of times, if they let themselves feel like they're attractive, it's a very emotional thing they're resistant to, because they don't have time for that. They have so long seen themselves in a lens of, I'm not good enough, so I need to improve myself. This is very true for physique folks, that for them to really bask and get some of those healing vapors of feeling like you really did the thing, if they never come, man, you're missing out on a much kinder and gentler internal psychology for yourself.
I can absolutely relate to this because I see it with some of my hardest working clients. Yep. Where they'll give me a physique update and they'll be like, Steve, be as critical as possible. And I am like,
that's hard.
Yeah. I'll highlight lots of positives. I'll be like, I don't blow smoke. Like I'm looking at this rationally from like a judging perspective. And they're like, that was so nice to hear. Like, I really didn't think I was anything. And they're just so much more positive about how they're doing and their progress and everything. And it's only like big thumbs up as far as I'm concerned. So if people struggle with that, I think having a coach that if they trust and care of their opinion can be really valuable in those sort of situations.
Yes. And if you don't get a coach to tell you this, I can tell you this right now on air, whoever's listening, it's totally awesome to love your body and what you've built. Don't let anyone tell you that's vanity or some stupid shit like that. The same kind of people that tell you that liking your body is vanity and is bad are the same kind of people that grew up rich and will tell you money isn't everything. Shut the fuck up. When I get enough money and I really bask in that shit, maybe I'll be able to say some dumb shit like that as well. But I'm never gonna, because I didn't come up with money, so it was very, very different. And so when someone didn't come up jacked and now they're jacked, it's like they're clearly doing it for a reason. They're clearly doing it because it's a spirit journey. Nobody bodybuilds to make money. There's tens of, like, unless you're already a pro and already really good, then approximately, you didn't start to try to make money off bodybuilding. People just have a vision of themselves that's better. And that vision is this positive vision of like, in the end, I'll look like a god, like a superhero. Well, the thing is, after about 3 or 4 years of training, if you're pretty lean, like compared to your old version, you're already a superhero god. Start basking in that and come to the gym to make that even better. Don't come to the gym to wipe the slate of your current body clean and build something finally perfect and finally pure and finally something worth looking at, because right now you suck. You're building a beautiful sculpture. And if you walk in on like Da Vinci, putting in the final couple of fucking, the little pickaxe thing they use for the sculptures, if it's already this human element that's huge curves and all this wonder, you're not going to be like, oh man, like, you better, that competition for sculptures coming up pretty soon. You better hurry up and finish. You're going to be like, whoa, this is great. So even if you're still a work in progress, and we're all works in progress, you've already come so far. See it from the perspective of, wow, I've already built this wonderful thing, this wonderful body. I'm going to stare at it. I'm going to fucking stare at it at the gym. I'm going to get a pump. I'm going to fucking stare at myself. I'm going to take videos of myself lifting. I'm going to stare at those two. And I'm just going to bask and bask and bask in my own fucking aura of awesomeness until I'm like a regular person and I feel totally normal inside my body. And then won't that be great? But if you never accept how awesome you are and how much work you've done, it can be real tough, and you can always feel less than. And at the worst, the best case scenario, it's just a shitty way to spend your life in your own head. Always feeling that you're inside like something that's not functional and really care about how functional it is. It's almost like if you have a guy who came up with not very much money, really cared about cars, and he always had shit cars that were beaters and just used them to get to work and back. And finally he makes it really good in business, a few good years, and he buys like a new C8 Corvette, the ones that look like Ferraris nowadays. If you talk to him, you expect him to be like, fuck, look at this thing. I love this thing. If you talk to him and he's like, yeah, man, I don't know. It's not a Ferrari and it's got some cool specs, but I really wish it was just like a Ferrari or a Lambo. You're just like, the fuck did you buy this for? So when you're in the gym pounding away at your body and creating something truly magical, really there's nothing you can find about your body that you like. There's nothing you're building that you like. The thing is, if you start building things about your body that you like, you should get addicted to building the cool things that you like, and then it's this positive journey with no stop and improvement. I think some people really think as soon as they nod the cap to themselves, like, you're in good shape, you hear this all the time, motivation is going to disappear. Like, no, it's not. You're just going to want more of this good thing. If you are very negatively minded, you're just going to have a bad time the entire time. You're never going to feel satisfied. A lot of those people just quit the sport altogether. They quit training because it didn't give them that fulfillment. They'll start a family. They'll get into religion. They'll get really career oriented. They'll start like getting tons of tattoos or live a cultural lifestyle that's a bit different. And then they find their place finally. But it's like, you prevented yourself from finding your place in your own body just from some kind of in the ether thinking that you always have to be critical and negative and you could never really like, oh, I don't want to be vain. Shut the fuck up. You spend 2 hours in the gym a day. You're vain. It's totally cool. It's totally fine. Jensen Huang is a workaholic. He runs NVIDIA and is one of the richest people of all time. He'll tell you he's a workaholic. He's not going to be like, nah, that ain't me. He's not skipping time at work. So I don't want people thinking I'm a workaholic. It's already full send. Vanity is barely a fucking sin, first of all. Is that really clear to me how it's a sin? There's definitely vanity to the point where you're so obsessed with how you look that like the American Psycho thing, like you're banging your girlfriend, but you're really checking yourself out. That's weird on every single possible level. Look, if that's you, then do you. God bless you. But most people, when they're scared of being vain, they're just really scared of admitting like, damn, I like how I look. There is not a damn thing wrong with that. And the thing is, like, if I looked like Keon Pearson, I'd be the vainest person in the world. I'd be shirtless everywhere I went. Like, and if you told him like, oh, you're vain, he'd be like, wouldn't you be vain if you looked like me? Like, it's so totally fine. That's what you're in for. It's like telling Bill Gates he's like obsessed with computers. Like, yeah, and I'm good with that. If your vanity is hurting you in some way, hurting people around you, then it's bad. Up until that, it's just you having a really good time. Can you imagine like you're playing a video game with your friends, like a combat video game, first person shooter, and you get like your guy jumps into the mech and now he's got the mech with the rocket launchers. Someone in your game group, man, you really like being in that mech. Yeah, no shit, motherfucker, it shoots rockets. I would rather be in the mech than not in the mech. So like if you see your body's like a cyborg mech that you sit inside of, like, wouldn't it be sweet if it was cool? There's nothing wrong with thinking your body's cool. And I think a lot of people just from cultural upbringing, from internal notions, and honestly from just civility and just being a really like mild-mannered person, they don't want to lean into that. But if you're already training, if you already care about your body, don't you dare approach it from the glass half empty side, because then you just have a half empty glass your whole life. But if it's glass half full side that you're approaching from, physique is just a matter of filling that cup more and more and more.
I love that, because I do think, coming back to that sentence of kind of pro bodybuilders thinking they're bad genetics, I think sometimes they use that as a reason they ain't shit. So they're like, I'm going to use this negativity to push myself to be more because I'm nowhere near
these talented guys. Yeah.
It sounds like you're not in favor of that as a motivational or kind of way to drive yourself for more.
Great question. I've generally found that concerning myself with other people, especially in a sport in which you don't get to physically confront them with your hands, like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, MMA, I get how it can be about the other guy. Like, that's who you want to beat up. That's the world champ. Like, it is about him in a certain sense. But in bodybuilding especially, it's just the judges don't really even look at you guys compared to each other. They mostly just like rank you on a score sheet and rank the other guy in a score sheet and 6 other guys in the mix. And the rankings come out how they are. And then like you win or you lose. And it's complicated. Also, this is something that Jared Feather says really well. People have inspiring physiques that they look up to. You know, for me, it's like Kevin Levrone, hands clasp, most muscular. To me, there's a very few other poses that a human has hit that would shock me as much. I'm like, oh my God, like, what is this? How is this? Why is this? It's super inspirational. But what Jared says is like, you can only be the best version of yourself. You're never going to be Keon Pearson. You're never going to be any of these other guys. It doesn't matter who the fuck you look up to. You got to be the best version of yourself. And so when you're in the dungeon, when you're in the gym, when you're training for your next show, the only person you approximately have to beat is the last version of yourself. And that's all you can do. Bringing my best version of me is all you can do. And you neither have the genetics of the other person, nor can you get them, nor do you have any control over how they do their shit. I mean, they could have not really tried much before that. You achieve your ultimate physique, and then they come in with just a penultimate, psychotic, freaky physique, and you're like, dude, what happened? Like, yeah, finally got out of a toxic relationship and started getting 8 hours of sleep a night and really pouring it into my hobby. And you're like, fuck me, I never saw this one coming. So you have the other thing is you could bring a physique that's not even your best, but they came in way out of shape, and then you beat your rival. So what? You're supposed to be happy about that, but you know your physique isn't as good as it's even been in the last show. And so it's all of a sudden focusing on other people. There's also kind of a toxicity there of like, first of all, you're thinking about other dudes all the time, and I got news for you. That means you're gay. I'm kidding, but like, you know, the thing about other dudes, there's plenty of things that occupy my mind other than like other dudes' bodies. I'm good. And when you think about it, like, well, yeah, but that's your competition. Okay, let's logic this out. So what is it about them that I should be aware of? Like, okay, I can't have their genetics. I don't directly compete against them. I just present my own version of my best body. But exactly why am I thinking about them? I mean, the answer to how to develop your physique is the same no matter who you compete against. It's your best version of yourself. There's not a physique you're going to compete against. So like, hey man, don't worry about getting super shredded. You just got to work on big arms. Like, no, it's always both. It's always both. Like, we all have visions for our physique that no matter who we compete against, you're going to have to bring your fucking best. Like when Derek Lunsford is peaking for the Mr. Olympia, he wants to bring in the best Derek Lunsford there is. He's not like, oh, okay, Hadi Japan's going to be there. That means I have to like, that means what? Motherfucker, there's 10 other people, there's 20 other people on the Olympia stage. Everyone's got something better about them than you. Like maybe someone has a smaller waist, maybe not. Maybe someone has Derek Lunsford is outweighed by almost everyone on the Olympia stage. Should he be like, yeah, man, I really got to get bigger against these guys? Like, no, I'm sorry. What did you weigh last year at the Olympics? It was, from what I heard, it was like 220 or 225. You're like a few pounds heavier, maybe, and a few pounds leaner, maybe. That's the answer. You already number one. You're the tip of the spear. I've seen people do this where they get freaked out because someone's up in body weight close to them. They go overboard. They come in less conditioned, bit of a distension of the belly, and they fucking lose. And they're like, I was trying to fight the size game against people, but that wasn't my game. Your game is the only game in town. It's the only thing you have control over. And so that's really the only thing you should be mostly focusing on is you're designing this ultimate weapon, this beautiful sculpture, and you're designing it to be unbelievable, and you have no idea who else is going to show up. That's another thing, Steve. People get real comfortable with the top 10, top 5, and some fucking Nigerian asshole comes in and takes third, and you're like, what the fuck? Oh, sorry, I'll be specific. Andrew Jacked, who is Nigerian, right? He's got a name so complicated and Nigerian sounding, we don't even know his real fucking name, right? But like, who had Andrew Jacked in their fucking playbook 5 years ago? This motherfucker just showed up and shit on everyone, which is a classic Nigerian move, just being superior humans. But like, how do you work that into your shit? You got to keep track of all the guys. Again, if it was a MMA thing, you got to keep track of other guys because their styles, their games, you got to counteract their takedowns, their whatever. It's in bodybuilding, bro. There's literally like 13 total mandatory poses, and you know all of them in advance, and you know exactly how good you look at each pose. What can you possibly do but make each pose look better? Nothing. So can you focus on your competition if it really gets to you and really psychs you? You have my blessing to do that. Fuck these guys. Put pictures of the motherfuckers on your mirror, spit on the pictures before you do a set of curls, whatever you have to do, man, whatever you have to do. But for the most part, I've seen that just some people it really gets to. Most people, it's not the thing that you should be doing. Believe it or not, the vanity goes super high with this one. You think about yourself 9 times out of 10. It's all about you and your body. Think of it less as a sport and more of a perfectionist engineer's dream of an art project. That's what you're doing. Something you're setting the standard for yourself with something gorgeous. That's what you're building. Something pristine, something shredded to the bone and freaky. You shouldn't care who else shows up because you're there doing your own thing. And to be honest, as far as a show day mentality, you should really, really only care about yourself because you want to exude that Arnold confidence that literally puts more blood into your muscles and makes you bigger. You don't want to be all cold and scared and withdrawn. You want to be that guy. You're there to show off your best physique. And it's only up to the judges to put you where they put you. It's not up to you. You can't pose your way to first place. You hit your poses as well as you can. The judges decide. And that's my take on the matter. So I think, yeah, it's cool to be able to look to other people and kind of get that competitive bullshit with them. It can light a fire. But I think most times for most people, bodybuilding is a very individual sport in that sense of the word.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love that kind of you versus you mentality. And it comes back to the genetics as well. You've only got your hand that you're dealt with. You work as hard as you can with that, and you bring the best you can bring. There's no point thinking about if, but when, what other people are doing, because you have no control over that.
What are you going to do about other people? You can't do anything about it. It's kind of weird thing to be able to do nothing about it. And it's also like, this is really a mentality that tons of other athletes have, even when they're in sports that are more interactive. Like the best football players, the best basketball players, they don't super often think about what's the other team going to do. Like that's not the vibe in the locker room before the game. That's not the vibe 30 minutes out. The vibe 30 minutes out is like, thank God there's police on either side when we enter the field because we're ready for straight up war. One directional massacre. That's the plan. You don't care, fuck, man, line up anyone. Line up all pro offensive linemen, line up a grandmother, line up a bus or a truck or a rhinoceros. I'm going to fucking push that thing around. I don't give a fuck. That's the correct mentality for truly elite athletics. Have some famous people gone another way? Yeah, Michael Jordan used to make up stories in his own head about people who wronged him, but Michael Jordan has a bit of a different problem. Michael Jordan had left everyone so far behind. It was no longer dramatic for him to play basketball, and that extra drama fueled the shit out of him. Very special guy. I will also say, to me, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, Michael Jordan doesn't seem to be a guy who in his states alone in his head like the happiest person of all time, the most satisfied person of all time. His acceptance speech, the Basketball Hall of Fame, is like legendary for how much he shit on other people while he was doing it. It was like, ooh, it's kind of a weird look. And so do you want to win as much as Jordan? Sure. Do you want to be in Jordan's head? Like, to quote there was a Batman cartoon where like this guy was trying to get into Batman's psyche, like through his dreams. And the Batman quote was, he was like, my brain isn't a nice place to be. It was like, yeah, you're in constant misery because your parents got nuked or whatever. Like, so sometimes people who do have that kind of, they need a villain. They're not having a good time in their head doing it. And there are many other ways to do it. Nick and I were talking about this in the RP podcast a little bit ago. There's this guy, Noah Lyles, I believe is his name. He's like a 100, 200 meter champion.
Yeah, the USA.
Correct.
Did he win the 100 meters? In the Olympics recently? Yeah,
I think he won the 100 or something. He
but
like
not
didn't
200.
do both, but he's won the 200 so many times. It's kind of hilarious. But Noah Lyles, like when it's race day, it's just all about him. He's the only person on the track. He's got the flair. He's got the fucking outfits, the earrings, and like he's the guy. He can, in DBZ terms, he only senses his own power level. Everyone else just doesn't even detect. That's peak athletics. And in bodybuilding, your power level is the only one that matters. So like basically TLDR, the advice for those who are DBZ-esque, get into that time chamber, forget what's going on outside of that time chamber, and come out like Trunks and Vegeta did at such a level of their best that it just doesn't matter who they go up against. And you don't even know. Like Vegeta came out, he's like, is Cell still alive? They're like, yeah, he's even transformed to another form. He's like, whatever, where is he? Like it, because here's the thing, whether or not Cell is stronger than Vegeta on the outside or weaker, it doesn't change what the time chamber is all about. The time chamber is about pushing yourself to your limits and barely surviving, and thus becoming as jacked and strong and DBZ-esque as possible. The same occurs in bodybuilding. You give your best to make your best version of you. You don't control who else shows up in the literal sense. So just do your best. If it helps you to kind of caricature some drama, try it. If it's a bad vibe and you don't like doing it, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not necessary. And most guys just don't do it. And to their credit, most guys in bodybuilding, they just really kind of think about what they look like. Because most of them are adults and have realized that's actually the only thing that I can control to begin with.
It's really great you brought Michael Jordan up, because I loved the documentary on him. I'm sure you really enjoyed it as well over on Netflix.
It several times.
Yeah, it's really well done. But I listened to Chris Bumstead on Chris Williamson's podcast, in fact, and it was so refreshing to get someone again at the top of their game, but have a completely different mentality and outlook to getting there. Like he is everything you've really spoken about here, Mike, focusing on himself, not trying to put other people down. Very positive, but very grounded at the same time. And that spoke to me so much more in terms of the way I view things too. And it felt much more positive. And Chris seems like a really generally humble, but like very happy individual.
The championship mentality is something that is so covered in mystery for many people. And also, there are so many assumptions we make about champions based on a few of the vocal champions we are familiar with in our cultural milieu, and of course, like the movies and stuff like that. And I'll say this, true champions, I've met a bunch of them. They're quite different from one another, first of all. The ultimate arbiter of are you a champion is, do you have the physical architecture and the mental perseverance to win at sport? Like, if you have a Bill Kazmaier shaped body and you're tough, you're going to do real well in strength sport. That's really the case. Like I remember being around D1 football players for the first time ever. And I was like, everyone's so tall. Like, that's what it takes to play D1 football. And so the first thing is like, don't over index on their mentality stuff, because mentality isn't the most important thing about being a champion. The most important thing is, do you have the sports skills training? Do you have the body? And do you have the time spent doing that? And do you have that like ability to exert male aggression when it's time? And most dudes do, you know what I mean? One way or another, they're going to perform. But I will say a vastly disproportionate amount of champions that I've met are dudes that are kind of like almost a stereotype of like the popular football quarterback in high school. They're chill as fuck. They're cool with everyone. They're really easy on themselves in their head. When it comes time to train, they go hard. When it comes time to perform at the game or at the competition of play, they got that Michael Jordan tongue out. What do African-American folks call showing out? Like, time to really show these white women in the stands what your boy is all about. Like, it's just an exhibition to them when they play at their highest level. There's just one person. It's them doing that shit. It's not rivalry. It's not like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to catch the ball. There's very little self-doubt at the championship level, especially at the time of play. And like, that's a thing about which, if you make a documentary about someone or a made-for-TV inspirational movie, how do I say this politely? It's not so inspiring. Like, that guy's just a fucking man and he knows it. Like, there's not like a Rocky thought he was shit and he just through toughness came up. That happens. It's more rare. And so when people are really hard on themselves as very conscientious people, potentially a little bit neurotic, some of us in the bodybuilding space, and they're like, to be a champion means you're hard on yourself. It's like, you just haven't hung out with that many champions before. Champions mostly see the world really glass half full, open-ended kind of way. Like, when a real champion football player walks out onto the pitch, they're like, what am I taking from these people? What's mine to take? I'm a fucking conqueror. I'm a king. I'm going to have what's mine. It's time to eat. Like, that's actually like a thing people say in sport, like, time to eat. Like, let's go. Like, they're not like, oh, I sure hope I measure up. I sure hope I've been trained. No, there's none of that shit. And so if you're being really hard on yourself because you think that's what champions do, train hard. No exceptions. when you're on the field of play, perform hard. On your extracurriculars, your diet, your recovery, your sleep, your stress management, do all those things correctly. But don't think you have to walk around with this burden of greatness. Most champions walk around with like the mental analogy of their dick hanging out of their pants. Like, I'm the fucking man everywhere I go. You're like, God damn, that's literally a winning attitude. And victory on the field of play or in bodybuilding is more likely to occur when you're showing off to the best of your ability. You're not restrained and constrained and neurotic and worried about injury and all this stuff. The best wrestlers in the world are people who have that like reckless abandon. They're just like, as soon as the whistle blows, I'm doing crazy shit with my body to just show these people a good fucking time, highlight reel type of shit. They're not so defensive or protective, and they're just athletics. They don't have to be, but it's that vibe of like, I'm doing the thing. That isn't as sexy to emulate for those of us who like that Vegeta underdog thing. But like, oh man, I'm going to get real deep shit for saying this one. If you want to be a great champion, Goku's mentality is 10 times better than Vegeta's. And I know, Steve, we're both huge Vegeta fans. There's the spirit of the underdog in Vegeta, the one who is meant for greatness and is to claw his way back. I love that. I love that. But like, Goku comes in and just is his most athletic, and he's just having fun and just showing off how good he is, and he beats everyone. And you get way more Gokus in real collegiate, professional, etc. sport champions than you get Vegetas by a mile. And I've still yet to run into a Frieza, though that would be hilarious.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, I'm glad we brought Dragon Ball Z into this. They're also
so clarifying.
Do you have time for one more question? I think there was one question that came through that kind of links up into everything you've spoken here, or we've spoken about, is because you've transitioned a little bit less, you've transitioned out of bodybuilding to some degree. You mentioned not training your legs for like 2 months. How's that been for you? Do you feel like you have an identity shift? Has that occurred for you at all?
I was preparing myself this is a great question, Steve. I was preparing myself for an identity shift. And it never happened because on 250 mgs of test, which I've been on for roughly 2 months now, and on, whatever growth hormone that I'm taking, and basically nothing else, I now still have some glute striations. And I was 227 when I took like sort of my best picks ever. And I'm 235 and I still have glute striations. So kind of like, okay, my arms are, I think, like the biggest they've ever been. My shoulders are for sure, because I've been training the shit out of them. And my expectation for what was going to happen to me at 250 mgs was clearly just way off. I had a bet with Crystal, Jared, and Joe Jeffrey about what body weight I would be, and I lost the bet against all three of them, because all three of them kind of unanimously were like, you're going to struggle to even weigh 200 pounds lean. You're going to be somewhere between 200 and 220 if you want to be very lean, like for the next multiple years, just at 250 to 500 mgs of gear. And I was like, I sure shit didn't want to set my sights that high and get my hopes up. So I didn't. I was like, I'm ready to weigh like 190. Also, it was going to be like really refreshing and free to be super light and nimble. But Steve, it just never happened. Like, I'm going to be at the Olympia in a few weeks here, and I'll probably be in the Olympia in like the mid 220s with like pretty decent glute striations and just like probably 8% body fat or something. When you gain a lot of muscle, and most of my muscle I gained drug-free and the rest I gained on gear, it doesn't just go away. And 250 mgs of test is something that converts to like 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. So it's like top natty test, but all the time. And I've talked about this in a few other contexts. TRT is superior to endogenous production, which is completely unaffected by sleep, stress, any of that shit. You just don't have the ups and downs anymore. It's always 1,000 nanograms per deciliter exposure. And so the question of how much muscle and leanness can I keep at 1,000 nanograms per deciliter plus some growth hormone, the answer is like a lot more than I thought. So I was 100% ready for that mental transition. And then I'm just like, oh, I guess I'll just be jacked for longer. And now what I'm doing is a little bit of a trip. What I'm trying to do is re-architect my body into the most aesthetic thing that I can make it. Now, some caveats here. I'm not very aesthetic. And I know that there's limits to this shit. My own version of my own aesthetic best is different than like, I'm not going to be Keon Pearson anytime soon, right? So that's out of the question. But it turns out I actually have two passions about physique from a personal perspective. One is just to become a fucking veiny tank. And I lived that life and it was good and it was sweet. But the other is to be aesthetic. And I never really leaned into that. Like, I've never really bodybuilded in the sense of I just trained everything hard all the time. Like, my legs, it seems now, were like 8 light years ahead of my upper body. And people would tell me that at shows. I'm just never really registered. I kept going. Been training my legs as hard as I could just because I wanted freaky fucking legs, man. Isn't it cool? Some of the pictures I have, like my side chest with my glutes and hams all like doing weird shit and quads. There's just like, whoa, like that's a lot of stuff. It's just awesome, you know? But like, you know, like Big Rami's legs are arguably way ahead of the rest of his physique. His quads and stuff are just balloon looking. But man, that's some sweet spirit energy. So now I'm kind of transitioning into trying to optimize all around physique. And every time I'm like, man, yeah, I got to start training my legs again soon. I come into the gym before jiu-jitsu and we have the same lighting, same bodybuilding gym. And I'm like, oh my God, my legs are still bigger than my upper body. And I haven't fucking trained them. So it's not true to say I haven't trained them in 8 weeks. Here's my training routine that I've done roughly twice a week for the last 8 weeks. I do 10 reps of stiff-legged deadlifts with 135 pounds. Then I do 10 reps of sissy squats, knees to the ground with torso extended. And then I do 10 reps of unweighted walking lunges. I do that twice a week. Now, if that's training legs, I don't even know what the fuck is going on. But even with that, I'm seeming to retain way more muscle than I thought was possible. So over the next several years, what I'm trying to do is like juice my arms and my shoulders, my upper chest and my lat width, which actually has gained visibly in the last several months. And I'm not paying attention to back thickness at all. Cause like I could lose all of my back thickness and still have a thick back like that. You've seen my physique in real life. Like that thickness is not something you need to be worried about anytime soon. It's just the great distraction. I'm blasting my calves as much as possible because calves are big for aesthetics. Like a good piece of calves, forearms and shoulders are like a real physique completing. You know, like there's something there. There's that Miracle Bear type of energy, that pure classic aesthetic, that Wesley Vissers look where you're like, whoa, like Wesley doesn't have huge legs, but the proportionality of his calves, forearms, and delts are such that like you're like Arnold Jr. or some shit like that. So I'm purposefully detraining my legs, training my upper chest, upper back, shoulders, arms, forearms, and calves. And I'm going to be cycling between roughly 250 mgs of gear and 500 mgs of gear, mini cuts, masses, nothing crazy massing wise, and see if I can reshape my body to some significant extent. Later down the line, I'll probably get some plastic surgery going for my face. I'm kidding. That's an abandoned project. I have like big love handles that store a lot of water from back when I got fat on purpose to try to like do the spirit bulk. And so I'm probably going to get them shits cut off and maybe even get my waist tightened because like genetically, everyone in my family has a pot belly. Like you've seen my like waist in, waist out shit. I'm just tired of having a big gut all the fucking time. So I might have that. I've got some consults lined up to see if they can cinch it in. And to be completely honest, maybe that'll take me closer to like the late 2020s, early 2030s. And then hopefully we'll have some really, really cool pharmaceuticals to take. Like just as an example, mechanistically, there's nothing stopping the pharmaceutical industry from developing pure non-androgenic anabolics. So all you have to do is develop like a target for the myostatin molecule, like a vector, like a protein or some kind of chemical that latches onto the receptor and turns it off. And let's say like the half-life of that is a week. So like you shoot that thing into your subcutaneous space once a week. And after 5 or 6 weeks, you have functionally as little myostatin expression as you want, depending on the dose. That's already true with hunger. So I'm not just making things up out of thin air, like semaglutide and all those drugs. The more of it you shoot, the less hungry you get, to the point of like, you could just not eat any food and you'd still like, be like, I don't want to eat anything. That promise of a non-androgenic anabolic to me sounds really cool. And I kind of want to make it to that. But then I'm preparing my body for that because I want to use a drug like that that's going to have essentially no downsides, like other than some weird shit if you overdo it. But I'm not trying to weigh 290 because it's going to give almost everyone the power to just gas up like crazy. It uncorks every gram of your muscle, just exploding. Everyone's seen the pictures of the myostatin negative cow, the myostatin negative mouse, the myostatin negative greyhound dog. Like these are just regular animals that do not train and they just blow up with muscle. I want that applied to my more aesthetic muscle groups so that I'll like take a midway dose of that, train the shit out of my arms and shoulders and upper chest, upper back, calves, do some maintenance training for legs, or not even, because at that point that shit is so powerful your legs might start growing for no reason. So to get me the body that is really cool to occupy, that looks more superhero-esque. So I'm kind of leaving the Hulk journey behind and getting more into like a Captain America that was way shorter and uglier but took way more gear version, but still some of that aesthetic stuff. That's my new kind of aesthetic journey.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly super excited about it. And I don't care anymore if I'm the biggest guy in the shopping mall or something, but it looks, based on current trajectory, I'm probably going to be pretty fucking jacked for a long time. Like, for me to get below 200 pounds and stay there, the amount of myonuclear domain I have, the amount of satellite cells I have, Jared told me this a few days ago. He's like, if you want to weigh less than 200 pounds, you can't lift weights. Like, if you lift weights, the muscle growth is so radical that you'll have to be at like 6% body fat at 205 pounds. You're not going to stay there. That's what it seemed like. And, you know, there's all this new research coming out too about muscle memory and how powerful it is, including if you use steroids in the past, it really levels you up kind of fucking forever. Let me tell you this, for the past 2 months of being on 250 mgs a test, and I'm usually very responsive. Like, I take fewer drugs, I look notably different. I take more drugs, I look notably different. This past 2 months seems to illustrate to me that, like, yeah, man, this shit really hangs around, and maintenance is way easier than making gains. If you've built an impressive physique before, keeping it super impressive and whittling away at the edges to try to make it more aesthetic, I think that's a real thing that can be done by tons of people. So the idea is, like, once you reach your late 30s and you can't put a ton of new size on all around anymore, the fact that you can't improve your physique at all, well, I mean, what's his name exists? The 3DMJ co-founder,
Jeff Alberts.
Jeff Alberts, fuck that guy. He's like 80 or some shit, and he's a ripped to shreds. He's an objectively better physique at like age 50 than he did at age 30. And he would already train for 15 years at age 30. And it was like that. I'm starting to feel those kinds of vibes a little more.
Cool.
I think a lot of bodybuilders who retire in their early 40s or late 30s are the guys that played the mega drug size game, and they're just done with it. And that's a real good idea. That's not a game I'm playing anymore. But I think the whittling away aesthetics situation may have some more bandwidth for me. To be completely honest, like, I was ready to give it all up and just focus on philosophy and other shit. But like, I don't mind being physique focused for another few years. One thing I realized, Steve, recently is I love this shit, man. Like, I was getting ready to train much more jiu-jitsu and much less hypertrophy, but like, as soon as I realized I could still have like a physique in the future that's more aesthetic than I've ever brought and leaner than I've ever brought to the stage and just brought to pictures and to my own existence, I was like really excited about it again. I was like, fuck yeah, man. That's so sweet. Because to me, like I said, I'm taking a break from competing. Because compete is a lot to competing. And I have all this fucking Dr. Mike bullshit, fucking RP crazy. Like I had a choice to continue to compete for this whole summer. And there was a competition for masters at the end of August that I would have been very shredded for. But as an example of one of the reasons I had to pull away from the sport, in the middle of that, I had the Diary of a CEO podcast, which you fly to Los Angeles. You talk for 4 hours and then you fly back. That's not good for bodybuilding prep. And it's kind of like half-heartedly doing prep. I'm not going to say no to the fucking Diary of a CEO podcast. It's fucking crazy. It's like the top 5 podcasts in the world or top 20, some crazy shit like that. And also, like, I want to be my most cogent and most kind and most caring and most intelligent. And I'm like, gram and a half of gear, that's just not going to happen. And so I'm like, all right, I got to reel this back in. So I'm done competing for a while. But I'm not done with the journey because I never did the journey to compete. Competition means very, very little to me. It always has. Like, I bodybuilded for years and only competed once every 5 years or something like that. I just love progress, just getting leaner and more jacked and more aesthetic, somehow, somewhere making some progress. That's what really gets me. And because I feel like a little bit of a new lease on life that I can make some progress and do it while I'm cogent mentally and not super insane, man, I'm really liking that. And it's cool to still be in that physique space and not have to see myself out. When it's time to see myself out, it'll be great. But I guess maybe kind of reaffirmation that I sort of like this for some good reasons. And the reason is the journey and the process. Is like the outcome is like, yeah, like I've already been super jacked and lean. It's only for vibes at this point. And Steve, to be honest, it was only ever for vibes. Like I never had to do any of this shit. Did you have to bodybuild? Like, what the fuck are we talking about? What do you win when you turn pro? Like, they don't even give you money. in pro bodybuilding at natural level, you don't get paid to compete. Like, you might nominally get like $500 or something like that, but like, it's not a living. It's all for vibes to begin with. And so the number one vibe is building that fucking awesome body that's the best version of yourself. That's always been my reason to do it. Competing is going to come back in my life. I'm going to for sure compete. It's definitely a monkey on my back. I'd like to fucking shrug it off and put an awesome physique on stage, but that's going to be later. And I think later I could actually offer, especially for the masters division, something that looks better on stage than I've ever put. And we'll see if it works out.
That's so nice to hear. I'm very encouraged by that as well. And I think a lot of the listeners will be too, because that's what we've all known you as like the bodybuilder Mike, and continuing down that journey. And it's nice to see you get this kind of new lease on that too. And it only sounds like positives from like listening to you there. I'm sure there's some like downsides potentially, but overwhelmingly very positive. And yeah, that's really cool. And I think everyone's going to be excited to follow you along on that aesthetic journey. It's been fun following you get Hulk-like and become a huge veiny tank, as you said. But at the same time, the kind of seeing you then kind of mold your physique in a different path, that's going to be pretty gnarly as well.
It's going to be interesting. I don't want to make any claims like I'm going to be good or anything, but if anyone's ever actually listened to what I said, I've never made claims like that. Like, I remember there's people every now and again read a comment that's like, how do you know this? Facetiously, of course, because they don't. I'm being sarcastic. But some people are like, yeah, man, Mike really wanted to turn pro to prove that his methods work. I'm just like, whoa, if Mike was so unscientific to think like an N of 1 was going to prove anything, he'd have to retire his PhD and just cower and shame the rest of his life. Like, please don't tell me that. Like, that's absolutely not the reason I'm doing it. Like, the only reason that I ever wanted to turn like Masters Pro, and still arguably will in the future, we'll see if that happens, it would be cool. Here's why. It's just like, because I took second at nationals once, and I was like, oh, it's realistic. It's like, if someone's like, yeah, this thing that's pretty neat, these people that you look up to your whole life, like you're actually within striking distance, like why wouldn't I try? And then I realized like just early this year, I was like, oh man, like what it takes to really get good at competitive bodybuilding is sucking up so much bandwidth that it's interfering with my like whole career of being a science communicator. I'm like, okay, pause on this shit. I'm going to get back to it. But like, I'm not some delusional asshole who thinks like I have to turn pro to prove my methods. That's actually total nonsense. I have books proving my methods. Like, so also I don't know what it means to prove methods exactly. Like really only empirical research can do that. We fund a lot of it at RP. I'm a co-author on a bunch of stuff, but also like as a researcher, you can't really prove your own methods because replication means that other labs have to confirm it. So in the end, like other people, like Einstein didn't prove the theory of relativity. Multiple experiments, especially during one of the eclipses, proved the theory of relativity. He didn't even do those experiments. It would have been unethical for him to do those experiments because he could have fudged the data. No one would have ever known. So it's just really trippy when people assign a meaning to your journey or your intent that you didn't assign yourself. So I'll tell you why Mike shouldn't be in bodybuilding, why Mike should be in bodybuilding, why Mike shouldn't compete, or why he should, is almost everyone. It's just purely speculating and almost no insight whatsoever. And the reality is just like, I was competing in bodybuilding because I thought like, well, for not really giving a shit about posing or pageantry or any of that stuff, I might be able to crack some fucking skulls. And I did. But then I like, I wasn't that great in the last couple shows. And also like I had a lot of other shit going on that I didn't have a few years ago. It's like, oh fuck, okay, well, I'll be back to this. But it's not like this like, man, like it means everything for me to be a great competitive bodybuilder. Like I could say, Steve, it would be really like, cool to say that, like real spirit journey type of stuff. Like if someone's like, what does it mean to you to be good at bodybuilding? Everything, crying with a microphone. I just, honest to God, it's just, that's just not it. It's kind of like, all right, this is dope. Like this is really fun. Yeah. But it's not like for jujitsu now that I'm doing more jujitsu, and I'll be getting promoted to black belt at some point in the future, no doubt. And there'll be black belt Dr. Mike, and that has a different flex to it on the YouTube and stuff. People are going to be, oh, are you going to like do worlds? Are you going to compete? I'm like, no, I'm going to compete here and there at like local masters shows and get my ass beat. I'm not trying to be the best at jiu-jitsu, not even close. I'm trying to be the best version of myself, given my constraints, which is the same thing in bodybuilding. And in competition, really, you get sorted according to all this other stuff. And I don't like, that's not something that drives me a ton. Never did. And I mean, like, look, if I wanted to full on be as good at bodybuilding as I could, I'd hire a coach. And Jared is my coach, but I negotiate a lot with him. I wouldn't negotiate anything. I'd just be like, I'd hire someone like Matt Jansen or someone like the cement mixing guy, if his name escapes me at the moment. And it'd just be like, just do me like you do everyone else. And then, you know, I would like have the best chance of turning pro. Being an athlete's way easier than being your own coach. But I insisted on coaching myself mostly with Jared's assistance and guidance, and a lot of me being cynical about what he was saying, and also to, you know, very like we have a combative relationship at times because Jared and I are both trying to learn shit. The number one reason I compete in bodybuilding or do this at all is I'm trying to really get some wisdom out of this. And the more mistakes I make, the more wisdom I get. If I just win stuff, there's not really a lot you learn when you win stuff. You're like, I don't know, I guess this is it, but maybe it's not. Maybe I just got lucky. If you're losing and if you're not placing as well, you can learn a lot of stuff. So would I like to be better at bodybuilding? Fuck yeah. Yeah. Otherwise this whole conversation is just like the biggest hit of copium anyone's ever fucking smoked. Of course I want to be better at everything I do, but does it drive me a ton to prove something that I could? Like, I'm smart enough to know that if I turned pro, I would get just as many comments of like, yeah, but it's all drugs in his case. And plus he shouldn't have won. The fucking class was weak that year. There's no stopping that. And also those people might have a point. Like, just because I turned pro doesn't mean I know anything special. Tons of bros have turned pro being fucking borderline illiterate. How the hell is me gonna, like, Lane Norton knows a ton about training. Does it help that he's the IPF world champ, like multiple years and like the deadlift and stuff? Like, if you're a TikTok 19-year-old, it helps. Because you're like, whoa, and he's also the best. But if you're like an intelligent person and no sports science, you're like, I know a lot of the other guys that train for the IPF. They don't know a third or a tenth of what Lane knows. This isn't a test of his knowledge. For Lane to periodize his own powerlifting training tests like 100th of his knowledge base. Which, by the way, folks, it's just not that difficult to periodize powerlifting. There's some nuances in there and all the stuff. It's just a pretty straightforward process. So is Lane like proving that he can do it? To himself, maybe. To some people that are younger, less refined in their intellect? Yeah, sure. To people that really know things, it's just Lane also has really amazing genetics and work ethic. Like, you don't deadlift 700 pounds unless you have fucking amazing genetics. I won't debate that with anyone. It's beneath me to debate. Steve, you ever tried to pick up 700 pounds off the fucking ground? You trained for a while, right? So Lane also has all of that, but like, is his winning the WPF World Championship, is it proving that that's belongs? Let me tell you another quick story. Mitchell Hooper, the current world's strongest man, phenomenal athlete, okay? I've talked to Mitchell. He is fucking smart. He's master's degree. He's evidence-based as fuck. He's strategic. He's calculating. He runs formal periodization. The whole 9 yards. He's doing it right. Is him winning world's strongest man proof that the evidence-based way works? Like, yeah, if a sample size of 1 proves anything, it doesn't. Evidence-based folks themselves can't allow that kind of thinking, you know? Mm-hmm. And like, what does, you know, what does it prove that he won? Like, well, I guess it proves that people can win on a bro approach like many of the guys take and on an evidence-based approach. But the only thing is like, if you interact with Mitchell Hooper and you watch him compete, he just has some special shit going on that basically can't be quantified. He just somehow makes shit happen. He doesn't look that big. He doesn't look that strong. He's just doing it. Somehow he fucking does it. And you're like, what? He'll be the first person to tell you. He's like, yeah, it's like, I got into this and it didn't take that long for me to realize like, oh, I can do these things. You know, can you imagine like the heaviest object anyone's ever lifted? You're like, oh, I can lift that. You're like, what? That's what it proves for sure. Everything on top of that is kind of like, So while spirit journeys are really fun and while it's cool to get accomplished and look your best, you got to be real careful about what an N of 1 actually proves. It might prove nothing at all. And then it's kind of like can you imagine like if I was like, I really took my shit real seriously and I finally got a master's pro card and I'm like fucking the speech, you know, at fucking nationals and be like, I proved that the evidence-based way is the best because I beat all these other guys. Okay. And then I go like do a pro show at 212 and I take 8th out of 7 people. What am I proving now? Nothing. So the question is, what was I proving before? Not much, man. Not much.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And it's particularly the talk about like you live the bodybuilding lifestyle because you love that lifestyle. You don't live it to compete. Like you
No,
do, it's
God,
the other
no.
way around. You compete because you already do the whole bodybuilding lifestyle that you love. And that's definitely the way I go about it as well, because I wouldn't be probably continuing to compete if it was the other way around, because I
Well,
haven't
Steve,
done
what do you
that
get out of
amazingly
competing?
well.
Like,
Exactly.
right? Unless you're unbelievably good at competition,
It takes away
competing
from
is,
work, like you said. Like
oh
you can't.
yeah.
I think about the amount of things you have on, especially now I'm within weeks of shows, and I'm already like, I need to book out next week because I've got a peak week and I'm depleting and I'm going to be tired and useless. So I just need to do the bare essentials. So, and then there's
That's
like
tough.
you said,
You
the
got a career,
pageantry.
you got a coaching company, you got a whole fucking job. Like, oh, what the hell am I doing with myself? And it's just for vibes. There's another phenomenon, a little bit related to this conversation. I want to cover super quick if it's okay with you, Steve. There's this thing where the file under the hierarchy of understanding of there's levels to this. People don't see the levels. They get stuck on whatever level they're working on. They kind of think that that's the level. When they get above that level, they realize there's new levels to this. I asked Alex Hormozy once, who he's like has like $100 million or whatever. That's his whole claim. I asked him, like, how does it feel to have that much money? And he's like, honestly, man, like, I wish I could tell you it feels great. But as soon as you level up to 100 million, a lot of the acquaintances you have in your life and the buildings that you live in have billionaires in them, or people have 700 million. And all of a sudden you just feel like nobody again. There's a small fish in a big pond. And you're like, oh, God damn it. This whole thing restarts all over again. And so a lot of times you think about bodybuilders that like have a standout showing at nationals or USAs or win the amateur Olympia. And the guys that can regularly win shows and make it to the Olympia are a very small fraction of those guys. And a lot of bodybuilders on social media, huge presence. And for their physiques and their knowledge and all this stuff, they train clients, they have in the time of their lives. They'll compete and they'll take like 6th at a pro show, 5th, 7th, 8th. To them, a few shows like that, what the fuck are they supposed to think when someone asks them, hey, why haven't you competed for the last year? There's not a politically correct thing to say, because the honest answer would be like, every time I compete, it's just illustrated to me that I'm just not that good to break through that next level. And every time I compete, I tank my health, I stress myself out, I pull away from family, friends, and my actual work of promoting myself as a fitness influencer. And what is exactly that I'm getting out of all this? Because it's easy to say like a pro card is a cool thing because it's a yes or no, 1 or 0, unequivocally. They have or you don't. It's a very North Star to compete for. But once you turn pro, there's this whole sea of darkness that opens to you and you're like, fuck, I had to do what? I got to win to go to the Olympia? And you tell yourself, you believe it. You just turned pro, you're a ton of momentum, people are in your ear telling you you're amazing, and you take like 7th at your first qualifier. And it turns out that you're like, you just happen to be 6'3" and you weigh 290. And for you to really compare shape-wise against the other guys, you'd have to weigh 320. And you're like, fuck that. I'm not dying over this shit. Because, you know, like those absolutely high body weights, it's not like a how I feel conversation. It's the doctor being like, the machine that keeps you alive when you're asleep is turned up to maximum and you're still choking to death. I don't know what to tell you. You're just going to die really soon. Like, at that point, you got some fucking trade-offs to make. And so if you're insanely focused on competition with no end in sight, you just end up one of these guys that when someone looks over your competitive record, like, wow, you competed in 15 pro shows and you took 5th as your best one. It starts to be a weird story to tell yourself. But a lot of the guys don't want to pull back from competition because of this aura of comparing to other guys. Because if you see regular people in the gym or the people in your Instagram comments, they don't give a flying fuck about your competition. They just want to see your cool muscles and follow you and talk to you and all this other stuff. They think you're the man already. And because you're a pro, it just doesn't matter. You're already on, like, you know, the gods of Olympus don't compete against each other. You're already on the fucking Mount Olympus. You did it. But when you meet other guys, and I've seen this thing with Jared and a few other folks, pros will meet each other. They're like, hey, what show you do next? And then it's one of those ego things. Really, this motherfucker, man, I'm trying to get in the mix and prove to these other assholes what's going on. But if you're on track, clearly improving, or you know that the improvements you have to make are logical and possible and feasible, your placings are on average going up, and everyone around you says like you do have potential to be on the Olympia stage, God bless you. Keep competing and keep fucking gassing up. Dude, if you turn pro and a few shows later, they're like, dude, you're just 6'3", man. And there's this guy, I'm a huge fan of his physique. I think his name is Josh Maley. I might be mispronouncing that. I swear to God, he's 6'6" and an IFBB pro bodybuilder. But it's a different look because he weighs like, I don't know, 320 or some shit, something baffling on stage. Steve, he looks like he's not filled out, especially in his arms. Now, if he ever sees this and catches me in real life, he's going to rip me apart. He's fucking enormous and super scary. But he almost certainly knows I mean it with all the best intention. Like, I ain't shit compared to that guy. I'm put it out there. But he's ripped, strided, glutes, everything. He just has kind of like a 6'6" guy's physique. And like, he's competing and he's doing better. Like last show he did, he fucking was top 5, I think, for sure. But it's one of those, like, if you're him, but in a slightly different universe, where your arms aren't coming up, even though you're blasting the grams of gear, at some point you got to think like, am I that guy that's going to the Olympia? And it's a no doubt painful thing to say to yourself, like, no. But at some point, asking yourself why you're competing is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because everyone, sorry, real quick, Steve, I'm super ranty today. In the common culture, when you're around regular people and they see that you're super jacked, Steve, I get this question all the time. What competition are you training for? They literally think you look like that only when you train for competitions. They think everything is competitively based. And that can also pour a little bit of salt on the wound of, oh man, like, people expect you to compete. And I would say, like, that's totally dope. Compete because it's logical, because you want to do it, and for no other reason. If it's like, if Keon Pearson wanted to quit competing, well, he's already won enough shit that he can. But if he was like doubting himself, I'm like, Keon, are you out of your mind? You're the next coming of Flex Wheeler. Shut up and lift this weight and eat this food and you're going to be great. But if someone who didn't have obvious promise to do top 10 in the Olympia, had already turned pro, competed a bunch of times, really liked it, but now it's just more of a chore than anything. It's kind of like, just stay jacked and awesome and train your clients and be super popular on social media. And it just does not fucking matter. The idea that you have to keep competing is irrelevant. It's very, very much brought home to me after my last bullshit where I had, I made that video where I was like, I'm not competing anymore. That video got a ton of views. And then just no one ever really asked about it after. No one cares.
Yeah.
Quite liberating. And if I want to get back into competing, people will also not super give a shit about that. Like, no one really gives a shit. A few people in hardcore bodybuilding do, and everyone else is like, oh, that's cool. You did a competition. Is that good? Did he do good? I don't even know,
Yeah, I think we, in our head, because competing is so like all encompassing, it feels like it's like life at some point. And so you think everyone else is thinking that way too about it. And then actually you zoom out, it's like, actually my business is better when I'm not competing and people just enjoy watching me train and be lean, and I could do photo shoots. I don't have to get like striated glutes, whatever it is, Yeah. So there's a whole nother side there. And I think particularly you said, like, thinking about your why, especially as an enhanced bodybuilder, when you are taking various anabolics as a natural, like, the health consequences aren't quite there, but also the rewards aren't as high generally. So it's like, you got to do it for you, no one else.
There's nothing else.
What have you.
There's not even anyone talking about you outside of like natural bodybuilding forums or something.
Exactly.
Like,
Mike, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to be able to take 2 hours of your time and dig into all these subjects. I think people are going to really enjoy this. Have you guys got anything in the pipeline that you can talk about, or is it the same YouTube channel? Did you get to 3 million recently? Did I see that?
No, 2.5.
2.5. Well, you're going to be at 3 in no time.
I don't typically kind of a dick for doing this, but other folks at RP will make all these cool posters when we reach these these milestones, and they'll send them to me to share them. And I sometimes don't share them because to me, like, it's just kind of meaningless. It's not meaningless objectively. It's a cool thing that, 2 million, 2.5 million or whatever, 3 million is going to be really cool. But I'm just so involved in the process of like making the videos and stuff that I'm like, I don't even look like, what are we doing? The number just keeps going up. So to me, it's dope. But also to me, it's like, like, I also don't, this is kind of strange. One quick aside. What I'm doing on YouTube comes really naturally to me. Mostly I'm just being myself. And it's not particularly difficult to sit down and record stuff. No, we work hard. I work harder on other projects than I do on YouTube specifically, because working, like you never accuse a news anchor of working hard, you know, like they're doing something. It's not exactly the hardest work in the world. And so I don't, I feel like the YouTube thing has been really awesome. I can't say I feel like it's this thing I accomplished, like I built and I'm really proud of. It's neat. It's wonderful. But it's not exactly something that because people say like, oh, congratulations on the YouTube. And I'm like, oh yeah, thank you. You know, when you walk off with a shitty powerlifting trophy that you got for taking third place in your class when you're 18 years old, and someone goes, congratulations, it fills you up with joy. Because like, yes, I did accomplish this thing, because you really wanted to accomplish a thing. On YouTube, I'm not really trying to accomplish a thing. Any accomplishment would be completely arbitrary. By the way, 2.5 million, 3 million, that's all arbitrary. Like it's arbitrary that we use a base 10 as a numbering system. And so like congratulating anyone on any level of success when the line doesn't exist is like, so what about when we get to 5 million? What if we get to 10 million? It's like a really big party. I don't fucking know. So I don't want to come off all wrong here. I appreciate everyone who says really kind things about the channel and stuff. But to me, I'm always kind of like, oh yeah, we're doing that. It's more of a doing thing than of like, we don't even have milestones, to be honest. Like I've tried to talk to Scott, the video guy, about milestones and goals. We both keep circling around back to like, just keep doing our best. Just have absolutely no idea where we're going with this. You know what I mean?
Yes, I get it, because fundamentally, like the whole time I've known you, Mike, and the content you put out, I mean, it's changed a little bit in terms of like reaching a broader audience. It was very like bodybuilding and evidence-based specific stuff and very nerdy, which I love. But it's still along the same lines. It's still Mike doing the same sort of videos as you would do for like Juggernaut. Like I remember you doing videos for them, but now you're reaching a broader audience, and that's essentially the change.
Yes.
Which is quite nice, to be honest.
It's very nice. It's a huge honor, huge privilege, but so far, maybe it's gotten to my head. I don't know, man. Steve, you knew me for too long. I'm still the same asshole that makes fucking dick jokes. And I'm actually the guy, I haven't, changed much on the channel. I was on the Diary CEO podcast, and a couple of comments were like, oh man, he's really reeling it in for this one. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to I don't know Steven that well. And this is a very professional podcast, CEOs and shit. I was like, I'm going to put like a gentler face of myself forward without as many raunchy jokes. But yes, it's like we all present a little, like you talk to your grandma, you talk a little differently, you talk to your friends. That's kind of that. But there's no way in which I've like just not myself anymore or some shit like that. And approximately day to day, functionally nothing has changed in my life. Like I wake up, I go to work, I train, I work some more, I watch TV with my wife, I go to sleep. Like the number of followers you have on YouTube doesn't really change that in any way. And also like, yes, we're making as a business like infinitely more money now that the funnel is huge on YouTube, but like I still just invest all my money. So like I don't do anything differently, literally day to day, do nothing at all that's different. And so when someone's like, oh, how's all this YouTube stuff? The only thing proximately to me that's really strange is when I'm walking around in real life, like people at our local grocery store have been like, Dr. Mike. And I'm like, oh fuck, I did not see that one coming. That's a trip to get recognized in real life all the time.
Not just in gyms.
That has made me think about what this whole junior league fame bullshit means. Is like, whoa. Like I remember Scott and I, like the channel was growing psychotically, and Scott was like, is this real growth or is it just like a bot farm in China? You know what I mean? You never can tell. And I remember we were walking down a street, like just early this summer, we were walking in New York City, him and I together, was there for a work project. And this guy like almost falls off of his bike, stops his bike in the middle of the street, turns around and goes, Dr. Mike. And after that, Scott was like, it was really enlightening to see, because we had a couple other instances like that. He's like, it's really cool to see people who know you in real life, because it means like the shit is real. Like real human beings know who you are. That's been an impact, because like I've been social media famous for a while, especially in the evidence-based space. Nobody fucking picks me out of a crowd or on a plane. I'm just like, I was telling this, I think to Nick a little while ago, when you're out in public, you bask in the anonymity of being out in public. Like, especially in London, if you walk around like Center City, London, like it doesn't really matter who you are unless you're like Messi or something like that, like some crazy footballer that's insanely popular. No one, like there's celebrities will pass you in London. Nobody gives a shit. Everyone just keeps going.
It happens.
Yeah. And like, but then there's someone like one of the princes, like Prince Harry, Prince, whoever the fuck the other guy's name is, they can't go anywhere. I'm not remotely that famous. But in my own little microcosm of going to the mall and having 3 people come up to me and say hi, that's really different. And I cannot imagine what it's like. Steve, imagine if you were The Rock. You're in Los Angeles. You want to go out to dinner. There's a nice sushi place. Do you go? What the fuck? Everyone except for like a grandmother will know who you are. You're going to stop the room when you walk in. It's always about you everywhere you go. That's got to be a real trip.
And it might be in your future, Mike. Who knows?
Yeah,
but I guess you're having to manage this at the same time. But again, yeah, if people, I mean, everyone over here, I imagine listening will have already be subscribed to your YouTube channel. But if they're not, I'll definitely make sure your social media handles, all of that, are in place. And obviously, you've got the hypertrophy app, you've got your diet app as well. And people can go check those bits and pieces out. Again, I imagine tons of the subscribers are already part of your
there's
ecosystem.
Always new folks to catch. Yeah. See,
sure.
Thank you for letting me ramble so goddamn much. I feel bad as usual, but at least it's 2 hours of content.
Of course, this is my role. That's the way I always interview. Is if the person has stuff to say, that you're the person who's meant to be saying it. So thank you so much, Mike, for your time. Thank you guys for listening as always, and we'll catch you soon.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The Minicut movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.